and provide just really kind of a profile of how you might consider using this land. It's really just kind of, to me, an extension of our comprehensive plan, and that we can really take a deeper dive into kind of a market analysis of this land and what might businesses or mixed use or housing or childcare. It gives you kind of all that information. It's at no cost to us. The only expectation is that we send at least 3 individuals to the conference. Myself and Kate were already planning to attend the conference because we are currently DCI members. And so that's why I indicated that in the aim. And then we have an opportunity to send one other person or more than one person. And that's the cost we have to take on, is just, of course, the admission for the conference, hotel and lodging. So that's where they indicate what the cost is. They give you a general idea of what that expense is, but it's really just going to depend. And of course, we'll try to carpool and do everything to keep the cost low since it is in Durango, but that is the only expense to us. Otherwise, we get all of that DCI time for free.
That's great. And what month is it going to be?
So they'll do kind of their scope starting January, and they'll meet with the boards and commissions and talk with you all, but the conference is in April. And they'll wrap up the whole challenge and offer us the final report in late April, and then do some kind of workshop planning in June. So it's about a 6-month program that we get an opportunity to do. And DCI felt like this was great because not only are they working with the DDA right now, they also are kind of tagging in with our comp plan. So this is, again, just kind of a very well-rounded opportunity, I think, for us. And I think it's worth it to have someone provide a bit of an analysis of best uses of town-owned land.
I agree. Yeah, if you need somebody from trustees, Tanya Corvlin and I are the only ones not run. They don't have to worry about an April election.
When is that training anyways?
The conference is in April.
Thank you.
Okay.
So thanks for clarifying that. Kathleen Chippa and May Gerald, hopefully that gives you some more knowledge or more information to digest around this. I think we got some comments to the email as well. So thanks for that. Any other questions on the 4 consent agenda items that we are voting to approve tonight?
Need a motion? Motion approved consent agenda, item 4, that includes 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, and not 4.5.
And thank you. And actually, remind me, we don't have to consent to it being moved, right? That was just no. Okay. Thanks. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks. We have a motion, a second. Macy?
Mayor Pro Tem Mahold?
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail?
Yes.
Trustee Severs?
Yes.
Mayor Billy?
Yes.
Trustee Sterling?
Yes.
And Trustee Corvalon?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time with that. And then, so with that, we'll move right into our action items. We have 8 action items listed.
Do you need a motion on 5.1?
And as you'll see with 5.1, we are looking to continue it. So just for a quick statement, keeping animals ordinance was noticed as a public hearing for tonight. Given the complexity and the interest in this ordinance and the fact that we have so much going on tonight, I want to give it its just time. We are wanting to make a motion.
Motion to defer 5.1 to the January 2nd Board of Trustees meeting.
I'd like to attempt to make a friendly amendment here.
Okay, go ahead. Go for it.
Could we move it to the January 2nd meeting as a discussion item?
Okay, and
Are we allowed to do that?
We're finding out.
I was just telling, so right now it's been noticed in the paper as a public hearing tonight because there's amendments to Chapter 16 of the code. So if it's on January 2nd as a discussion, it's not a public hearing. And so then Miranda will just need to renotice it in the paper when there is going to be a public hearing.
So at the time that it becomes an action item again, if this friendly amendment were to be accepted, at the time it becomes an action item again, then we'd have to do another public hearing.
Yes.
But not for a discussion item on,
Correct.
say, January 2nd.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, my reasoning being, I think that Planning Commission subcommittee has done a lot of great work. The Planning Commission has done a lot of great work on it, but I think there's a lot of things that we need to talk about and work through to the extent where I don't think it's actually ready to be an action item at this point, at least from my perspective and my reading of it. So,
Can we finish it in your term?
sure.
Good,
Do you accept that friendly amendment?
I do.
I'll second.
Trustee Sterling,
Yes.
trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahol,
Yes.
trustee Severs,
Yes.
and trustee Corvalon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So the motion carries. And I just want to thank everyone for the public comments we've received to date. And I know we're not giving you a chance for that tonight, but we will starting in January 2nd. Thanks. With that, we'll move on to the second 5.2, the second action Board of Trustee vacancy is Miranda. Are you?
Yes.
Thank you.
So this is being brought back before you. It's the Board of Trustees vacancy. Just a quick context for those of you who are joining us. On October 17th, John Mountain resigned as a trustee per Colorado Revised Statute 314303. The Board of Trustees has the power to fill the vacancy by appointment or election. At your meeting on November 28th, the Board of Trustees directed the town attorney to draft a resolution filling the vacancy through the regular election, which is in your packet and what you would be voting on tonight. However, you also directed staff to start the application process for appointments to fill the vacancy. And so we provided a recommendation of the timeline, which would be we would release the applications tomorrow. They would be due on January 5th. We would have an orientation for applicants on January 9th. The time might vary. On the January 16th, you would interview the applicants and decide who you want to appoint, if anyone. And then if you did want to appoint, that person would take their oath of office on February 6th. Just a reminder that this timeline for applications runs at the same time as nomination petitions. Nomination petitions for the regular election opens on January 2nd and they're due on January 22nd. And I believe it was the goal of the Board of Trustees that anyone who did apply made a commitment that they would also complete a nomination petition to run at the same time. That's just one thing you wanted to consider and have an application, have it as part of the application, which we've added, and apologies, I didn't put it in the packet. We have added a check mark that just says like, yes, I intend to complete my nomination petition.
Any clarifying questions for Miranda?
It's a tight schedule, but it definitely looks like it can be done. And I think I'm glad we clarified how Colorado law had changed the process.
Yes.
So what do we have to decide tonight?
Right now we'll do clarifying. Well, if we look at the aim, yeah, it's a resolution, and we have proposed motions, but we have some more clarifying questions. I actually have definitely one on the schedule. We'll do clarifying questions first, and then public comment, and then we'll get to the point of motions. So my issue is I kind of liked when we talked about this last week. I remember that applications would be due on the 12th and there would be that overlap, and it would be okay that we potentially have that January 9th orientation inside that period, which to me is fine. The orientation might make people say, nope, no thanks, and pull their applications. And it also gives us 10 more, an extra week of overlap with the petitions for the election. And so the only adjustment I'd like to see on that schedule is a January 12th applications due.
Just to clarify, so January 16th is currently our regularly scheduled meeting, and it's the second meeting in January.
Correct.
So if we wanted to have someone in office by the first meeting in February, we would need to add an additional meeting, is what you're saying.
No, on the 16th, we would do everything else would stay the same. It's just that instead of their applications being due on the 5th, which doesn't involve us having a meeting, we give them the extra week. And if we want to do it the 11th so that you have that Friday to do the aim, okay. But personally, I think Friday's fine because you can add applications to the agenda on Monday anyway. So
I'm just worried about them not attending that orientation then.
That would be, that would be good information for us if we're going to put that as a parameter around application, then, you know, if they don't attend it, then they haven't met that parameter. And if we, and I think that process itself might help inform some people to just say, no, thanks, or yeah, I can't wait, or I don't know what I think. Yeah.
I really like that. And I like the idea of sending the general public through that orientation on a regular basis as a public service offering, if nothing less. Maybe they don't want to run this year, but maybe they got a taste of what it's going to be like. Maybe 2 years down the road, they liked their training and they come back and it's just another way for the public to kind of get a little taste of what it's like to do this.
So would the orientation still be on the 9th then, just to clarify?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. What I like about that, or my vision, and kind of what I thought I heard last week, is it puts it in the middle of that. It puts it inside that application period, which I think is fine. Maybe
In
better.
that case, also piggybacking on what Trustee Seaver said, that orientation could be for folks who are considering running as well. That way they could all be together.
Yeah, it could be for as many people as possible as we want to show
But
up.
if we like advertise it as for people applying to the appointment vacancy, then people who are running might not come.
Oh,
So I think we should open it to be a BOT orientation session that we feel everyone should go through, including people who are considering running.
whether you're considering appointment, right, and or election.
Right.
Yeah. A quick question. Would there be a way for us to attend as BOT members to answer questions and say hi and encourage engagement and participation, encourage people to run against us, those of us who plan to run, and just try to strengthen and enliven our democracy? And so I don't know if that would need to be publicly noticed or something like that, but I like the idea of having it be a bigger, broader opportunity to educate the general public for what it means to fulfill this role.
I like that. So those are just clarification in the schedule change request. Any other clarifying questions for Miranda or town staff on this, or Macy? I guess this is for Miranda. It's not like. I guess, and if there's any questions on, we're not making any decisions around election, because the motion is actually about the election, right?
The resolution really says that you're going to fill the vacancy through the regularly scheduled election. However, you also open an application, and if you get any applications, you'll interview that person and you may appoint somebody.
I'll wait till there's public comment is done because I have another question about this timeline thing.
Okay. If there's no clarifying questions, Tanya or Nicole, do you have any clarifying questions?
No.
Okay, we'll go ahead to public comment then. Public comment on the BOT vacancy and how to fill it. No one in the room? Anyone online? Okay, hearing or seeing no one, and if you're trying to get on, we'll let you give the comment, but we'll go ahead and bring it back for now to the board for discussion and a motion.
So my concern is somebody misses the orientation session and then submits an application in the 3 days intervening, right? That they want to be appointed to the Board of Trustees. And I would just like to avoid that because I can see people waiting till the last day to submit their application and then missing that orientation session.
But don't we get to choose who we appoint?
We do get to choose who we appoint, but you know, people, what if people that we like do that, right? And then we're put in this weird position. We're like, well, we wanted you to do this thing, but I guess you got around it. So that's my kind of annoyance with that. I would like to make it part of the application that you must attend that orientation session. And if you don't attend it, then you can't apply.
Yeah, and I would like that too. And so to me, that kind of, if they don't attend it and apply later, then they've kind of not met all the parameters.
Yeah, could we just make that part of the application?
Can we change the date of the orientation? Why does it have to be on Tuesday? It's the only day available for staff.
No, I think actually it's not a great day for me anyways.
Oh.
I think that we just, those are your work session days. That seemed appropriate. That's the reason it starts at 7:30 because I have something with the Youth Coalition at 6.
But yeah, we might have something else on the 9th too, I think. So,
The 9th being an orientation.
so, I mean, I think, what about Tanya's question? I mean, could it be, what would be a better day that week?
It could be that Thursday.
The 11th.
Yep. And then you're catching everyone. And if you have it due Thursday instead of Friday, then they can submit by 5 and then come to orientation at 7.
Yeah.
No, I think Billy wanted it to be within the application window. That was the.
Yeah, Friday's fine because you can always update your agenda on Monday, so. Which is not optimum, but.
The 11th is better, so 11th works for us.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen small pools before, and if we get into a situation where the people who we hope are going to apply don't, or they put it off to the last minute and then they haven't gone through all the things that we were hoping they would go through, that would just make the whole thing more complicated, I think, and a little frustrating. So I'd like to make it a criteria of the application that they attend that session. Like, you don't have an application unless you've attended that session.
Right, it's kind of part of completing your application.
Yeah.
I can live with it.
Tanya and Nicole, what are you thinking?
One of my thoughts is if someone is already pre-blocked on that day, or they can't make it for, maybe it's childcare is the reason that they can't make it or whatnot. So it's sounding like though in that situation, it doesn't matter. Like everyone's gonna kind of have to attend.
I mean, you could attend virtually just like we can attend virtually at meetings. That's why I kind of liked it on a Tuesday, to be honest, because that's the day that you have to make clear for these meetings to begin with.
So if it can be done virtual, that's an option, Miranda.
Yeah, I mean, we'll always we'll hybrid everything unless we say otherwise. But yes, this can be hybrid and live streamed.
You can owl it.
Outlet. Yep.
Does
Yeah,
that work?
If that could be articulated that that it's hybrid, so that folks at home can attend, that'd be great.
Thanks, Nicole. Tanya, thoughts?
I think that's a good timeline.
But are we going back to Tuesday?
No, I
think
thought
we
we were
just
pushing
did.
it to Thursday.
Oops.
We definitely talked about pushing it to Thursday, and then Nicole brought up the point of just unavailability for a meeting, and then Eric brought up the point that he picked Tuesday because Tuesday is the day of the week when these meetings happen, so it might be a good one for folks to really look at the realities of Tuesdays, and so that's why we're kind of talking about Tuesday again.
How long a session is it, Miranda?
About 2 hours.
So you're talking 7:30 to 9:30?
Yep.
I think you can leave it on a day that works well for you, Miranda, and we'll call it the theoretical Tuesday. And just,
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's fine. We just can't start at 7 because I have to leave something at 7 to get here. So
right.
So what I would do is I would move to approve resolution 2023-50, filling the vacancy through the regularly scheduled election. And I would direct town staff to release applications for the BOT vacancy in adherence to the proposed appointment schedule, with the modification that the orientation session be a prerequisite to application, and that the orientation session happen in that week before applications are due, but on a day that is manageable for town staff.
yeah, Tuesday, and then do you want to also add that applications will be due on the 12th? That's the other amendment.
I think we can leave. Wait, that's changed?
That would be changing.
That's right, that's changed, the 12th, yes.
Can I give
Include
public
that in the
comment?
We got through that, but yeah, I did say if you chimed in, you could. So yes, go ahead.
Okay, Kathleen Chipai,
Just one,
Magnolia Star Route. I just want to make sure I don't think it should be a barrier to have missed it, that you have to actually amend what you're doing. I'm not sure it's legal to tell somebody they have to do something before they can apply. And you guys have the power to not pick them if they weren't there. So do you want to cut yourself off of the ability to not be able to pick somebody because they missed this meeting? I honestly, I'd like to know from the attorney if there's not possibly a infringement of First Amendment to be able to put in an application. I don't think you guys need to say if you don't put in an application, you're not being considered. I think you should protect yourselves and leave the opportunity open, because somebody might not be able to make it that you want. And you might be infringing in people's rights to apply. I don't think you can have a barrier in front of the application. The sole decision is in your hands. If you don't want to appoint somebody, you don't have to appoint them for whatever reason it is. But I have a caution flag here, and I actually would love to hear what the attorney says about it.
There is a motion on the table.
okay. Thanks for the comment. There is a motion on the table. And I'm gonna have a quick call for discussion after the second. So, was that motion clean?
Maybe, can I ask one as maybe staff?
second.
Because we do need to modify the application that perhaps we'll release on Thursday, just a day later.
Oh, yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, like that you open it up
We'll release
on the
it
7th.
Thursday morning instead of tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because I worry we wouldn't get it till tomorrow night anyways. So.
Sure.
So I'll
But
second.
Okay, I know there's a motion, but this is Tanya. I'm gonna vote no on this because I agree with Kathleen about the mandatory.
I'm gonna say a second, and then I'm gonna open up for discussion, and you can make your point. So I'll second it. So there's a motion on the table in a second. So now I'm gonna open up for discussion. Tanya, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think we should make that meeting mandatory to apply. I think we could lose out on good applicants. Kathleen's right. If we could use that as criteria, if we're debating between two good people, the one who showed up and the one who didn't, a lot of things can happen in life that could impede even a virtual meeting from occurring. And it seems unfair to me to make that a criteria for applying. I mean, it could be used as a plus or pro or con during discussion of this person, but yeah, I agree with Kathleen, so I'm gonna vote no right now.
Okay. Just to throw a little more gas on that fire, we had also talked about, requiring or recommending, or whatever word we decide on, that they attend one of the BOT meetings in that interim. So that would allow them, there's two opportunities. There would be on the 16th of December or on the 2nd of January. So, I mean, just to come back at you, Tanya, I personally am fine with putting these parameters on it. And I guess I do want to ask Attorney Madsen whether there's a legal thing consideration.
You can really decide what your application criteria is for the appointment to the Board of Trustee position. And if that criteria includes attending a training session, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't see how we could possibly be infringing on, of all things, First Amendment rights. This is completely within our discretion to appoint someone or not. It's completely within our discretion to set up the application. I mean, the application itself has boxes to fill in. If you don't complete the application, then you're not considered. So
Right, the application is required.
Yeah, the application's already required. So you could claim that somebody is unable to fill out the application as well. And I mean, I don't think this is a reasonable argument.
More comments or more discussion with the BOT? or
And
the
to be
trustees?
perfectly candid, right? I'm not that in favor of appointment to begin with, right? So I'm obviously putting guardrails here to make sure that if we do appoint someone, there's somebody who's actually going to do this job.
Yep.
Right. And to me, the excuse, oh, I couldn't make the meeting because of a family application or something. It's like, well, tough. We're all missing family applications.
Mhm.
Yeah, the only thing I was gonna add is, so by making it flexible, people, the actual orientation, people can take it where they need to. I think that is a must. But you know, in terms of making it a requirement, it's just like any other application process, there might be things that you have to do before you actually get the job, so to quote. And that's oftentimes multiple interviews, and sometimes it also involves training. So I'm fine with it as long as it's hybrid.
Tanya, more thoughts?
No, I'm just stick with my no on it. I don't think it should be mandatory.
Okay. So, any more discussion before I review the motion? So we have a motion on the table to approve, this resolution 2023-50, filling the vacancy through the regularly scheduled election, and at the same time directing town staff to release applications this Thursday, December 7th, is our new date for releasing applications for the BOT vacancy in adherence to the proposed appointment schedule with the amendment, or with the change of a January 12th applications due. And then there was a second. Did I miss anything? Okay. If we're good, Macy?
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
trustee Severs,
Yes.
trustee Sterling,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahol,
Yes.
trustee Corvalon,
No.
and Mayor Billy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. So the resolution passes, and with that, we will move on to our next action item. Is it 5.3 on public, the use group table amendment for private schools on public lots.
Yes, so this is coming before you at your request. Just kind of a reminder, the catalyst for really this discussion is when Teens Inc. brought their proposal to put childcare on a town-owned lot, and we as staff identified that there's a zoning consideration here, and that if that was a desire of the Board of Trustees, you could really take it two routes. You could look to rezone this lot so that it mirrored what is allowed under special review use, which would be all residential zones, neighborhood commercial, general commercial. Or you could update the use group table to allow for private schools on public lots. You ultimately opted to kick this to the Planning Commission because it's a Chapter 16 zoning change, and have them really look at that use group table change and assess if it's appropriate to allow private schools on public lots under a special review use hearing, which was town staff's recommendation. The Planning Commission reviewed this at both their October and November meeting, and ultimately unanimously voted to recommend approval. For them, they really landed on, of course, keeping it as an SRU was important to them, and noting that this really opened up the conversation. It's not just about the Old Town Shop lot, it's about any publicly zoned lot, and allowing for the conversation to happen of whether private schools could occur on any public lot. And so tonight before you is ordinance 854, which amends Chapter 16, Section 1632 of the Nederland Municipal Code, which would allow private childcare centers in publicly zoned lots. Your options tonight in terms of proposed motions, if you're ready to make a motion, would be to approve the ordinance as written, to approve the ordinance with changes, if you'd like to list changes, or to deny the ordinance. Again, I just want to reiterate, because I know this is hard because it was originally promoted under kind of the teens discussion, that this really is separate from that. And if approved, it of course allows that proposal to then begin the SRU process once the ordinance takes effect. But this decision is not a guarantee that that proposal is being accepted by the Board of Trustees. It's just saying that you're willing to let the SRU process continue.
Yeah, and it opens up for all public lands, to clarify. So if someone wanted to build a childcare facility in the west wing of the community center when it comes down, this would have to be in place. Or in Tilden Park, this would have to be in place. Or on any public lands. So though it looks like it's super targeted for the town shop site, and I can understand people's, the optics and the concern, all these other places folks are suggesting, we need this in place for that as well. Any more clarifying questions for Miranda?
I guess I do have a question, and that is in this determination of a private school, are we able to clearly specify that it should be a nonprofit private school rather than a for-profit private school?
I think if we're going down this road, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but it's addressed to Miranda.
Well, I guess I'm saying in general on public land, I am in general in favor of allowing a special review use for a private school or childcare center to be on public land. But I think that we're all thinking about the Teen Sink thing, and we know that that's a nonprofit, and that's why I'm kind of okay with it. I'm not sure I would be okay with it if it were a for-profit enterprise on public land.
If it was a charter school
Right.
for Boulder Valley, for
Exactly.
instance, would you?
I might be less inclined to think that they should have the right to even submit an SRU for public land if they are a for-profit enterprise.
Can I ask for some logic behind it? I mean, I'm not saying I disagree. What's the logic out loud?
Well, generally speaking, nonprofits are exactly what they say, right? They don't operate for profit. They are public charities for the greater benefit of a community of one kind or another. Private enterprises are not that, right? They're not, it's not that they're bad, they're just not that. When it comes to the use of public land, I think it should always be for the public good. And private enterprise has other obligations other than the public good. And so I don't think private enterprise should be allowed to operate on public lands if it's for profit.
Is that Attorney Madsen? Is that?
That's not that criteria that is not spelled out in the amendment that's before you tonight in the ordinance.
Right. But I'm asking, is that possible to do?
Yeah.
It's legal to do.
Yes.
Okay, that was my
To
question.
make that distinction between private, different kinds of private enterprises. That is to say, do they have to be a 501c3, registered charity? Can we put that in the law?
I'd
There are other
want
nonprofits.
to think about
For
it.
public.
Yeah.
I'd actually want to think about it.
That's just one nonprofit status too, I think, right?
Well, right. But I mean, I'd want to think about really your differentiating between for-profit and nonprofit and whether there are legal risks with that. So I'd want to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I, unfortunately, in reflecting on this, kind of reflected on too late in this process. But I do think it's something we should consider.
More clarifying questions or thoughts on Eric's comments? Yeah, I don't think it's too late. I mean, now's a good time and we can continue this if we need that time to be
Yeah,
clear on the
I'll admit,
legalities.
yeah, I'll admit that I was sort of blinkered by the current proposal. I didn't think I was, right? I thought I was thinking of it generally, but in truth, I was. I had the blinkers on, and I didn't really consider, well, if it could be any private enterprise proposing to put a for-profit business on Nederland public land, and they got a collection of trustees together that would be amenable to such an idea and got them elected to this board. Like, I'm just thinking 10 years down the line, none of us are on this board, and this could happen, and we've put that in place. Should we do that? I'm leaning towards no.
Time-wise, how much time do you think you need to think about, or before we could resolve this?
I could probably have an answer for you tomorrow, but that's not really helpful for you. So it would.
Well, I think continuing this, if, on something like that is reasonable.
Yeah, what I'd love to have tonight is a not a 4 on where we stand. And then I'd like to have no problem tabling this until the next thing, but I'd like all the discussion out of the way tonight so we're not kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, it'd be worthwhile. We have the, we know we have the time for it tonight. We're making the time for it tonight, but I appreciate that. Yeah. I'm with you, Tom, on that. Tanya,
How hard would it be to pass it as is tonight and then come back with an amendment to it in a month or so, or whenever you're ready?
This
I-
becomes
I-
an ordinance.
Add the word nonprofit and have it come back.
I don't see any reason to do that. Well, we can just potentially
Well-
continue it for 2 weeks and then do it clean and not revisit it.
Okay.
That's just my thinking. I don't think those 2 weeks are problematic.
So should we go, do we have more discussion to?
Do we have more clarifying questions, I guess, at this point, and then we'll go to public comment?
I guess I'd be interested, Miranda, a little bit more on, or Tom, how because it says the PC unanimously voted to recommend approval of the ordinance. And so it's just any bit of color or background as to kind of their decision process in suggesting unanimously.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the conversation was minimal. I mean, when it first came, we brought it as a discussion item without an ordinance, and it was quickly decided not to bring back the ordinance. They wanted to see that, and we brought back the ordinance. There was some conversation of, okay, when does it end, right? You're going to allow everything on public land, but really the Planning Commission puts a lot of value behind special review uses. That's incredibly important to them, and I think the end conversation really just landed in, yes, if as long as it's not used by right, the SRU process will help to determine whether it's an appropriate use for the lot it's being proposed upon. And so ultimately, they felt this was appropriate to, under an SRU, open up the conversation. And that's really the term that continuously was used for anything with a public change before you tonight, was really just, it opens up the conversation, and they're here for that. It doesn't mean you automatically approve it. It just means you start the process, and they have to go through their due diligence to have an SRU application done that really assesses the use, the impact, all of the neighborhood components that people are concerned about, that comes forward in an SRU. So I don't know, Mayor Potem Hold, if there's anything else you want to add, but it was a very kind of relatively quick conversation for them.
It was so quick. I had the same concern you did about nonprofit versus profit, and then my mind started to go from a white supremacist charter school to how could you go off the rails with this? But at the time, I think what they were looking to do was, like we're trying to do, is digest the entire snake. And we had a lot of items that night. We decided, as Miranda said, SRU process would weed a lot of stuff out, but this is one fork in the road that I'm game with. I had that concern then, I have the concern now. And if we could just get everything agreed to tonight, subject to, I'm completely fine with giving it a couple weeks for legal review.
Yeah, I just, the SRU thing, just like to point out, because it is quasi judicial, right? The criteria are pretty specific in SRUs. You couldn't deny it just because of the material that they might be teaching, right?
It would be too late.
You couldn't, but as a town, you could decide whether to lease
Right.
to that.
There are a
entity.
few backstops there,
Right.
but we could still have a lot of time wasted by somebody submitting a proposal for use that we don't actually intend ever to allow from our perspective, even though a future board might. So, yeah.
There are white supremacist 501c3s.
Yeah, I don't think that yeah, that's true. I don't think an SRU is the way to control this particular issue, personally. I think the SRU process is for something else. I think it's more tied to the use of the land and whether or not it's appropriate for the use of the land. I think what we're talking about is more legislative, more to do with the public good overall, and that we should bake that into who can apply to use public lands.
I have a question.
Yeah, go
Um,
ahead.
Well, I'm a little concerned that this could affect the current person who's looking for an SRU right now, which would be the teens and their timeline. And I'm also interested in what Eric was saying, that the SRU isn't the best solution for this problem. Would a use by right be a better use, if a use by right for nonprofit preschools or private schools? Because it still has to be decided by the BOT and everybody before it can be approved. It's not like, yeah, it's not a guarantee just because it's in the use table that town's gonna give away public land to anybody. So I'm wondering if even the SRU process is even necessary, if we amend it, if we come back to this saying nonprofit private schools only need apply, you know.
The one thing I'd say, this is kind of touched on what you're saying, and it goes back to what Nicole just asked, which I listened to in October to the discussion item on this versus the action item. And Timmy, is it Dugan or Duggan? Commissioner Duggan, he was the one, if I remember correctly, that was kind of like, well, if we start here, where does it end? And there was others, I think Commissioner Rivera, some others that, when Mike died, they came in and kind of agreed with that. And it was really like, ultimately the majority, co-chair Reese and others that would say, well, with this SRU process, we still have the catch-all, and that's how we'll be able to, not just have it go off the rails or just keep going and going and going. And I think
But it sounds
that
like we
that conversation happened more at the discussion where they did take some time with it, and then when it was as an action item last week, they had so much that they had really worked through, I think, the discussion, because they had come to the fact that it would be an SRU. And so that's why they moved through it quickly, I think, on Wednesday. But as for the SRU not being, as for your question, Tanya, Eric, what is your clarification of that? 'Cause that isn't
Well,
clear.
I'm sympathetic to that position, Tanya, that you have. I think that we do use the SRU too much as a catch-all, and I would like to see just basically a better code that articulated design criteria much more clearly so that we didn't have to rely on SRU all the time to get anything done. I am frustrated with the SRU process. I just think that we need to do a lot more work before we could eliminate that from this particular discussion, because we got traffic patterns to consider. We've got layout and design issues to consider in terms of neighborhood impacts and things like that. So when it comes to building a private school on public land, I guess, even though I kind of despise the SRU process, that I would still be in favor of keeping it in this case.
It's what we've got until we finish our plan.
Yeah.
And I think that this is kind of a pre-comprehensive or pre-SRU speed bump.
Yeah, I just don't think addressing the nature of the business should be done in SRU. I think that should be done in the use group table in the code. We should say what kind of businesses we want to be applying to use public lands for childcare centers.
Can we set that aside until later and get this one done? Review it, or are you saying we need to reopen the use?
I guess what I'm saying is I would like to see us amend this ordinance.
The 2 weeks,
to-
Jennifer,
To specify
talk through.
that this be for nonprofits only.
Okay, did you want to then slice it any more than that?
I mean, I don't know what criteria we could use,
I think there's a point of diminishing returns.
but I would like to see it be a public charity, a 501c3 in particular, not a religious school and not a 501c4 political entity like a 501c3.
Okay. Okay, yeah, there are not-for-profit.
Yeah.
Public benefit corporations. Would that be something you wanted to include? Colorado Daily is organized that way, for instance, or the Colorado Sun was organized that way, but even they have gone out to a 501c3 because of obvious problems.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, to me, that's the cleanest, and there's already a designation for it, and it's well understood.
I'm
Yeah, I
not
don't-
convinced.
Yeah, I
that's
don't think
the
we're
right
going to
way
have a
go.
lot of other feasible uses on public land that would pass the smell test. So yeah, I think we're coming close to alignment.
Hey, Tom,
Ma'am.
you had mentioned that you had already brought up the nonprofit piece to the PC when they were discussing it. Where did they toss that?
I didn't bring it up. It was going through my mind in one of
Oh.
those circles. I said, okay, yeah, the Christian nationalist preschool. That's and then I said, well, wait a minute. If it's a corporation, it could get a for-profit corporation. It could be anything. So I think I would have probably at that point suggested that we put this in nitrogen at the time, but I think I take the time now to do it.
If Eric has 4, then I think we move forward. I am not in support, for the record.
How come?
Well, because I think that what we're considering now is the land use being a school, being approved on public land. And I do not hold the view that a nonprofit is inherently better at delivering a public good than a for-profit entity. And I think that a nonprofit designation is simply a relationship with the IRS, and it's not necessarily a superior vehicle for delivering good to the public. There are characteristics of a for-profit entity that are also meant to provide public goods, such as taxes and profit. You know, there's a inherent drive to perform and to deliver value that is the essential intention of the free market capitalist structure that really prevails here in the United States. And I do feel that the nonprofits have many virtues that I have benefited from and do feel that have benefited society greatly. However, I don't feel that it's necessary for us to discriminate based on an entity's relationship to the IRS, whether or not we want to allow a school on public property. I think that we need to make a determination as to whether or not we feel that a school is an appropriate use of public land and leave it at that. And if we want to say that we don't believe in spreading hate in that school, then that would be different. That would be a different criteria. I don't know how we would build that in, but I'm not in support of prejudging a business or an application based on its relationship to the IRS, which is how I understand this Eric's motion.
So I want to make sure I hear you right. The way this was written, you would nod yes to, but inserting the nonprofit requirement, you would say no to. Okay.
That's
And
correct.
I don't fundamentally disagree with much of what Jesse just said. And to me, it's even less about schools, actually. And it's more about just the precedent of using public land for profit. Like, I just don't think public land should be used for profit and for any business, whether it's a school or any other business. And I do think that private for-profit entities can deliver a public good, but they should do so on privately held land.
So I'd like to, we kind of go, I'd like to make sure we have any more clarifying questions that go to public comment. We didn't do public comment yet, did we, on this? Okay, actually, is there any more clarifying? Actually, go ahead, Kayla. We'll ask clarifying questions afterwards. So yes, we'll go open it up for public comment on private schools, use group table, private schools on public lands.
Caleb. Oh. Caleb, it's 1250 Eldora Road. It is? Did I just blow it?
Hey, Miranda, we can't hear her very well online.
Oh, yeah.
I've been involved in a lot of nonprofits over the years, and one of the things that you inherently do in a nonprofit in the bylaws is you write escape clauses into them. I think there is an escape clause that you guys haven't thought about here, which is when nonprofits finally decide to dissolve, they become what? What do they do with all of their assets? So if you're going to have something that you want to only sell or you only want to have nonprofits on this property, you need to make sure that there's some language about it in perpetuity so that they can't decide, well, we're a nonprofit for 5 years and then all of a sudden we're going to go profit. And I have a question. Does the town, are you talking about donating these properties or, okay, because in the past, there've been several properties in town that, for instance,
By the way, we answered no with our heads for the
Right.
people that couldn't see us.
vacating of a road between two parcels. I'm not sure. Public land is a commodity that belongs to the people of a community. So do you get an appraisal done on the property and then sell it at fair market value?
So we're talking about the potential of leasing property to private entities that might want to operate, in this case, schools and childcare centers on public lands. It would be a lease, probably not a sale or a donation.
That's an interesting thought because in order for an entity to get money from a bank, they need to own their property unless it's a 99-year lease. So in essence, you basically are selling it to them.
Yeah, but that lease would have the very protections that you're describing, right? So if that entity were to cease to become a nonprofit, the 99-year lease would be void, right, et cetera, et cetera. So the lease would have the protections rather than the code necessarily.
Well, I think that you might want to revisit. I mean, I think you're writing laws right now or you're looking at ordinances based on a piece of property for a function that you're hoping to have. But then you're looking at all the things that could happen around that. There are a lot of pieces of property that this town owns that really would be beneficial to the town if you sold them to somebody for a house or for this or for, so I think, I mean, it's trying to put all your eggs in one basket that right now I would have more discussion and do a little bit more thinking outside your box of just this one project for making a law.
Oh, and
No,
that's
I agree.
That's precisely what's led me
Yep.
to this
Okay.
issue, right? Is that, like I kind of said, I was a little bit narrowly focused until I realized what the ramifications might be more broadly, which is why I think we probably need more protections than just changing the use. group.
Hugely, because the idea that a nonprofit is a nonprofit doesn't mean it's going to be that
Of
in
course not.
forever.
Yeah.
So just by saying we're only going to lease these properties to
Yeah.
nonprofits doesn't really mean.
Well, it doesn't even mean that they're
Anything.
inherently a more ethical organization. It doesn't mean that they're somehow better in any way, shape, or form. Only that they're not allowed to make a profit, right? That's the only criteria that I'm interested in there, right? I just don't want people to make a profit on public land.
Yeah, in the case of this, yeah, well, yeah. In the case of this particular type of private school, they're, part of their nonprofit status allows them to do the CCAP. Unlimited is their thing, so free scholarships.
Right.
No for-profit could do that. It has to be some kind of machine that has other monies that makes that possible. So, so that obviously we that is the elephant in the room, as some of us like to say, but at the same time, by putting it in there, we're just making it possible for any public lands. And then this possibility of putting a little more of a parameter on it. Again, it's just around more public lands. We don't know necessarily, and this is really kind of more for like a lease. But if there's a land swap or a sale or something, it's totally different, really. I mean, if we decide to sell to a private company, that's something we can do, I think. This is more tied to it stays public land and how can it be used?
Okay, I just think there's a lot more to this than you're you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Perhaps, I mean,
We're really only talking about a single cell on a use group table.
Yeah.
Right. And changing that N to an R. Like that's literally what we're talking about.
it's kind of a both and. I mean, really, I don't know if it's tying hands or just allowing a little more flexibility. And then there's that other process for all of its pros and cons, the SRU process. That still has to happen, you know, and that's all public comment, planning commission, BOT. So it's not a slam dunk.
No, I guess my point was there are nonprofits who are nonprofits at one point who then do not continue to be nonprofits. That could put you in a position of, okay, we've got this asset, then we could turn around and sell it. And you don't have, there's no provision in what you're doing that says that they couldn't do that. So that's that in perpetuity thing.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other public comments? There are.
Am I on?
Oh, go ahead.
Kathleen Chip by Magnolia Star Route. I'm going to second what Kayla has said, and I think there needs to be a lot more research. There's a lot going on here, and this has been modified and coming directly from the Planning Commission, and you guys have it as an action item. So I think, again, this is moving too quickly. I do believe that, well, we'll see what the attorney says. I do believe we should spend some time with the attorney on this. And I want to mention that right now, Catholic Charities is making a huge profit getting people to come to this country and cross the southern border illegally. They're making a crap load of money, okay? And we all know them as Catholic Charities, and that's supposed to be a good thing. So I agree with Kayla. Not all nonprofits live forever, and they end. And what happens when they've spent money on the building and the town has owns the property? Who gets the assets? Does the town have to pay the nonprofit when it closes out for the building? I mean, these kinds of things I think do need to be looked at further, and I think we're moving too quickly here on something that is significant. Changing one letter in the chart code isn't a minor thing. And normally, people are notified when there's a zoning change, because that essentially is what this is. So, I mean, it's a workaround. What is a zoning change? So use changes are huge, and I'm hoping that you all think hard on all these use changes in front of you right now. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. Do we have other public comments? I see some. Stephen? Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Yep. Good evening. Stephen Lefebvre. I'm Executive Director of Teens Inc. And in ways we'll agree with Kathleen and Kayla that nonprofits do dissolve. And what happens and what's written in the bylaws of nonprofits is that their assets and get transferred to another nonprofit. And that's how it happens. And within a lease like this, I don't think this is unusual for towns to lease publicly owned land for benefit. I think there's examples of fire stations and other schools, and it's not that uncommon. And it's written in a lease that if the organization is going to cease its operations or change its operations, then everything on that land goes back to the town for the use of public good. I'd also like to say that, I think it's in any situation like this, the town trustees are going to have to play a big role with their own judgment. It's very easy for a nonprofit or a for-profit entity to start a nonprofit.
I may not be able to comment after all.
Very, very easy for them to start a nonprofit to get around something that's put in a code like this, just saying it's a nonprofit. I think that no matter what, the trustees are elected to, protect the public good, and that's what they'd have to do if a shady organization came to the trustees with a, as you all said, like a white nationalist type organization or school. So I guess I don't see exactly why, how that would necessarily protect the land from being in good hands all the time. Like, the trustees and the elected officials will have to play a serious role in vetting the entities that came with a proposal. Yeah, so that's generally my thought, but the lease is what really protects whatever asset is put on there. So for instance, if an organization like Teens Inc. builds a building, if we decide we want to change that building into a humane society or something like that, then that building would, and the lease would be over, and the building and all the assets would go to the town based on the lease that we have.
Thanks, Stephen.
Does that change anything, Eric, about the way you feel? Okay.
Any other public comments? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board for discussion. And motion, potentially.
This is Tanya. I just kind of want to say I agree with Jesse. A lot of things that he said, that not all private entities are bad per se. He said it a lot more eloquently. And I also want to agree that there are plenty of nonprofits that profit, right? They pay. Just because it's a nonprofit doesn't mean it's going to be a good organization. I think that's naive to think so. And I think we should leave it as it is and trust that the safeties involved with the entire process is going to control the fact that you're not going to get a hate-filled preschool in your, run by the KKK in this town. It wouldn't, there's no way it would pass through all the different guards that we have in place. The SRU is just one of them. So I'm just not worried about it. And I think we're making a kind of like a big deal out of this that it shouldn't be, because I think it's naive to think that a nonprofit, just being a nonprofit, is inherently going to be a good. We could get a corrupt nonprofit involved. I mean, it's just, and we'd have to go through the whole protocol. I don't know. I don't think it's necessary.
The Moms for Liberty group that shut down, that just completely shut down the school district in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and started burning books and preaching hate is a nonprofit.
Sure, of course. Yeah. I mean, it's
my concern isn't about the nature of the nonprofit, right? It's a principled concern about using public lands to make
money,
private profit.
Okay.
That is my concern. It has nothing to do with the content of the education or anything like that.
A guardrail or anything.
Yeah, any business that is sequestering value for private gain, I don't think should be able to use public lands to do that in the town of Nederland. That's just my position on it.
Okay.
I think events will do that. Event planners, they'll lease out Chipeta Park, throw a concert, pocket some proceeds, and provide a public good. And I think that is a much deeper and broader debate that I'm not prepared to have right now. I don't think we as a board are prepared to have that, or to pin that debate to this particular topic, because I just think it's broader than the scope of this topic. And so, for example, a food truck that may set up on Chipeta Park next to the pump track on a given day, and they can make some profit if they pay their permit fees and
There's a
whatnot.
pump track at Serpentine Park?
In my mind, yeah,
Whoa,
in
I
my
didn't
mind
know
there
that.
is, yes, yeah, and it very much exists in my heart and head. Sorry.
Well,
So
you're right
Interesting
about
point.
that. Yeah. Any festival that comes to town that uses public land that, and all of a sudden nobody else can go in the park because there's a festival going on. You know, should we not allow that also now? I mean, this is opening a big can of worms.
I think what we want to consider is if we are in favor of supporting a school on public land, period. And I feel that there have been some really good debate coming up around this topic. You know, I think some of Kathleen's points are really come to mind in that, you know, the preschool does serve a very specific demographic and it is public land. I think that it's clear that there's a really great support for the preschool. I, for one, would like to see it happen. I want to support it happening. You know, I think that the community center could also be a great location. There's, you know, lots of ways in which we could look at using public land for helping and supporting the development of this preschool. I think there's multiple ways to get this done, including allowing for a school to be used on public land. We could, for instance, do a land swap and transfer ownership. Perhaps Teens Inc. could purchase the land. And if I recall one of Eric's comments from a previous meeting, that the residential zone is the only zone in which a school is allowed currently. So if we were to do it that way, we wouldn't even need to do a rezoning and we wouldn't need to do a use group rework either. And that might be a different way to get the same outcome that wouldn't even require for us to go through all of this process. And but this is the way in which we've come down the road to this point, and I am personally in favor of allowing for a school to be used on public land, regardless of its relationship to the IRS.
Okay, in terms of sorting this out, I think we're kind of at a fork in the road.
I
think I could make a motion to approve based on what's here and find out where we stand. And then in terms of process, Billy, if it fails, then we can come back and amend. At that point, we can amend the thing before we vote.
I have some I'd at least throw out. Also, I don't think we've heard from Nicole yet, but I'd throw out a both and idea before. I want to hear from Nicole before we move ahead, and then you could see what you think about a motion now or later. Nicole, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, Jesse, the food truck idea was something I was thinking about recently. It's maybe even an opportunity for revenue share in the future. And so for, you know, and there's probably some other ideas in terms of what public land could be monetized for. And so I don't think that's like a big stickler for me. I don't know if I agree though that the SRU process will catch those things either, because as we've said, it's about the use of the land, not so much the entity that's going to use the land. But I understand, you know, what that the PC putting the SRU process in place, you know, to be able to comment and to be able to, you know, make any requests as necessary. So it's what we've got right now. And in the end, I don't think the nonprofit versus profit piece is really going to hold me up.
Thank you. I'm just trying to look and see where the use group table is on other commercial uses of public lands. But I think one thing I might just suggest is that we have Miranda work, or Jennifer, you know, Attorney Matson, work on this edited ordinance that does break out nonprofits, and then And, kind of look into all the legalities and realities of it. And if so, which nonprofits, is it just 501c3 or are there others as well? And we have the ordinance in front of us, and then we bring those both back. Say we continue it for 2 weeks. We bring those both back and gives us time to think about it more, look at it more. It gives the public time to look at it and comment on it. And then we'd have 2 ordinances to look at, and or if Jennifer finds out that singling out the nonprofit is really a no-go legally anyways, that takes care of that option. So that's just an option I'm throwing out there. That would be not a 4 and a move to continue, but that's just an idea. No, I'm not making a motion. I'm just stating it, and then we can go from there.
Well, let's go with the, let's see. And so at this point in the road, we can either do the not of 4 and then decide if we want to defer, or make a motion to approve and take a vote.
I encourage you to make a motion.
Okay. I move to approve ordinance 854 to amend chapter 16, section 1632 of the Nederland Municipal Code to allow for private care centers in the public zone district with no changes.
This is Tanya. I second that.
We have a motion and a second, and I have a question. I think this happened a couple weeks ago when I made a motion. Can we go around and do a straw poll at this point as part of a discussion and then come back to?
No.
Okay, never mind. I'm just curious where people are at. Okay, go for it.
Trustee Sterling? Trustee Severs?
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail?
Yes.
Mayor Billy?
Oh, I'm sorry. I need a clarification then. Just because that just threw me.
Yes, Eric
so
voted.
the
against
motion
himself.
was
That's what happened. Eric just
Tom,
voted against himself.
Clean amendment, clean.
to go with the motion that's in front of us as it is with no
changes.
amendment. So you move to approve ordinance 54 to amend chapter 16 to allow for private child care centers in the public in a public zone district. Okay. I'm gonna say no, just to see where it goes.
Okay. Trustee Corvalon?
She
Yes.
voted. Okay.
And Mayor Pro Tem Mahone?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Well done. The motion passes. We have approved that, so we are approving private schools on public lands with no more, more clarification of nonprofit or profit, and it has to go through the SRU as part of the change in the use group. Okay. Thanks. I hope everyone out there got that. With that, we are moving on to action item 5.4, municipal code addition for parking.
Okay, great. So over the years, the Board of Trustees and the Planning Commission have been talking quite a bit about parking throughout town, including the development of paid parking on town-owned lots. You actually budgeted for paid parking in 2023, but kind of that got stalled out when we realized we wanted to pave the visitor center. Visitor center got paved and we're like, all right, we're ready. And Attorney Madsen really recommended allowing parking as a use in the use group table. And so not only is this a conversation about allowing just parking as a use, it's also amending the use group table to allow paid parking. Brought this before the Planning Commission. Vice Chair Reese and Commissioner Glasser have been serving on basically a parking subcommittee for a very long time. They were able to move pretty quickly through this and yes, recommending that, parking would be allowed as a use, and this is use by right. And so the recommendation is that paid parking as well as parking as a use is allowed use by right in neighborhood commercial, central business district, general commercial, public, and then any residential neighborhoods that fall within the Downtown Development Authority District, which is actually just a high density residential unit. So attached 2 maps since the other one's kind of hard to read. There were conversations when I went to before the planning commission about putting in kind of regulations to streamline the way in which paid parking would be executed. That was something staff originally brought to you when you kicked this to the planning commission. Great discussion unfolded that that was really not what they wanted to do. Originally, the proposal was you could only do QR codes or kiosks, but even kind of downright to conversations about like kids wanting to charge for a parking lot as a fundraiser would really be prohibited under that type of use. And so that's why you see in the packet a red line and a clean, so you can kind of see how the conversation went from the planning commission to now. So really all this ordinance is an amendment to the use group table to allow paid parking as a use and then just general parking as a use without any stipulations related to how the mechanisms of paid parking would be executed. So tonight before you, if you're ready to vote on this, you have options. You can move to approve ordinance 853, amending section 1632 of chapter 16 to allow parking lots and paid parking operations in certain zones and adopting regulations for paid parking operations. It would just be for certain zones. You can approve with changes or you can deny. As a reminder, this is a step in the process for town to officially engage with interstate parking. And so we can move forward with our paid parking that is a part of your 2024 budget. So happy to answer any questions.
First question, this is just in the downtown, within the DDA district, or is it across town?
No, so it would be all zones that are neighborhood commercial, CBD, general commercial, public. The only place it's allowed in residential would be if the residential property fell within the DDA district, which is one high density residential parcel. So in other words, like Old Town would not be prohibited to do parking as a use or paid parking under this ordinance.
Got it. Thanks.
Wait, why would Old Town not be allowed? Because they're not high density?
No, they are high density, but I think that the recommendation of staff is keep this type of use within the downtown district. So we use the
they're not
DDA
in the
map.
downtown
Yeah, we use the DDA map as the barrier for where residential zones would get pulled in. But if you note on the DDA map, the majority of the residential zone in downtown is not included in the DDA district. It really is one high density residential parcel.
Gotcha.
I just have one, I just didn't notice it earlier. I would have told you a while ago, but before we signed the ordinance, there's just a grammatical thing. Parking lots and a little footnote under the table. It's on page 91 and 94. So 94 is what matters more, but the parking lots and paid parking operations are permitted only in the HDR residential zones in which is also, it would either be zone which is also or zones which are also.
And I want to just make sure page 91 in the agenda packet is the aim.
Right, and page 94 though is the ordinance, and that's probably where it matters more. It's just so it's either, I mean, is that considered residential zones in the CBD or just one?
Currently, it's just one, but of course, the map could get redrawn at some point in time, in
Okay.
which case we're saying if a residential zone fell within, but right now it's.
So yeah, that'd be fine. So the HDR residential zones which are also, so that would have to be changed.
Well, and I guess Attorney Matthews
The
points out, currently the way that does read though is that right now it's a high density residential zone. That's currently with.
Singular. I'm not trying to be a stickler, but before we sign the ordinance, it's gotta be one or the other. I
Zone
won't say it.
are or zone is.
I'm happy you read it.
Me too. So I live in one of those other HDR zones. Other than that, what other clarifying questions do we have or anything else you see in the ordinance itself?
Having looked at this for over a year now, in depth on the planning commission side, I don't have, I'd like to, I would move ahead without reservation other than singular versus plural. That's me.
And Mayor Pro Tem, thank you I should have always indicated, the Planning Commission passed this, recommended approval of this unanimously with really minimal discussion, aside from removing the mechanisms in which paid parking would happen, so that it really is, it's up to the parking lot owner to decide how they want to execute paid parking.
They seemed pretty united in the discussion, when it was a discussion item and when it was an action item. So, yeah.
Yeah, there was, there wasn't a lot of debate. It was just questions and resolution. And I think people are at peace with this before it got passed up.
Agree. Any other clarifying questions before we go to public comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask in the definitions under paid parking zone. It says means an area designated by an official traffic control device or official traffic control devices. And I just didn't know what official meant in that context, like who determines whether a traffic control device is official? I mean, using the example of a kid, like raising money for parking is a child's eyeballs an official traffic control device? Like, how does that work?
So one thing, as you can see, there's the red line version that was before the planning commission.
Yeah.
And then the clean ordinance. And as part of the changes that the planning commission recommended to remove the manner in which paid parking is performed,
Right.
some of the definitions were removed as well. That definition is nowhere in the code now as
Great.
it exists. That term is not in the code.
Uh-huh.
So it could just be stricken.
Right, but right now it's not stricken.
I know.
Yeah,
but I'm
okay,
saying
okay.
we don't necessarily have to answer the question as to find out how that would be determined if you just want to strike the definition.
I think we should strike the definition. It seemed unnecessary.
Yes.
Yeah.
It made,
Good point.
it made sense when we again had the parking mechanism.
Right, yeah, I see that. But I just wanted to clarify before that I understand it before I
It's a
suggested
straggler.
removing it.
Yeah, it's a straggler piece of language.
Okay.
Where is that, Eric?
It's section 11-101 definitions. Paid
You see a
parking
red
zone.
line on page 99, and then it's, it's on the new ordinance. And
I just didn't want to be unnecessarily requiring people to have some kind of official device that we're not actually requiring.
Evil eye.
Yeah.
Page 95 in the
um,
middle, definition of page parking zone.
So what's with the bicycle racks? I know it's trying to encourage people to ride their bikes. Is that what the whole point of that is?
Or maybe just recognizing that parking is not only cars.
Gotcha. Are they supposed to pay then too? Is that a paid parking for that?
It doesn't specify.
But they could, I guess.
I mean, someone could try, I guess,
You're-
to charge for it. But
Theoretically, within the language of the code. You have a business idea, Tanya?
I mean,
No, I don't. I
do we
just-
want
there's a
to
lot of bike
allow
theft
that
going
to
on.
be?
So
an
if you
option for
actually had
folks?
somebody watching people's bikes, you actually might make some money. I wonder, I mean, someone leaves their bike there and they're not paying for that, the owner is not necessarily liable if it gets stolen, or just curious. I don't know. 'Cause the people steal bikes like crazy is all, so I just
I think it comes down to the
wonder
bail.
about that. So that would include then the kids trying to sell some parking, which is the scenario that we're having, but I don't see a whole lot of scenarios where that would happen, but they would have to have some bike racks there too then. 10%, okay.
so if they had one parking space, they would need to be able to have 10% of a bike.
Well,
There's electric bikes. It could be a bike charging station.
Do these, does this actually constitute a problem? Like what we're talking about here, like 10% of a bike? Should that be clarified?
We should probably say round it up to the nearest whole number. Or down, yeah, I mean, where is this? I'm sorry, I don't know where this is. And
it's
I'm-
11-102-5.
Frankly, I'm not okay. I don't think it's a great idea for us to open it up for paying for bike parking. I think
It doesn't require payment. It just requires the bicycle racks as part of the parking lot, paid parking lot.
I mean, technically, the racks could be stacked in a pile in the corner and unusable according to this ordinance. They just have to be on the property.
I just think it's
Well,
kind of
then-
silly. That's all. Just extra, but I know their intentions are good, sustainability and all that, but.
Well, and perhaps I can just clarify, so under off-street parking, that this is brought over because that is currently a requirement in off-street parking, is that there would be bicycle parking available. So it's just a kind of emphasizing, and it does align with a lot of your plans and that you're looking for multimodal transportation. You need to provide bike racks in order to encourage bicycling in town. And so that's a lot of the kind of this carry through. But no, it doesn't mean you have to charge for it.
Can I make a suggestion that we say is required to provide accessible bicycle racks on the property in an amount that is equal to at least 10% of the number of marked parking spaces in the parking lot? I think that would solve our problems.
So is that 10% of the parking spaces, you have to be able to park that many bikes there or that many racks? Or how do we break that down?
It's racks.
It's racks per parking spot.
Per parking space calculation.
And a rack can park one bike or four bikes?
It doesn't specify.
I like bike racks and I'd like to see as many of them in town as we can squeeze in, for the record.
I mean, we could remove the word rack even and say bicycle parking.
Can you restate it again?
So what I'm saying is if we add required to provide accessible bicycle racks.
So the private property owner or the designated operator is required to provide accessible bicycle, we have to decide if we want
Parking.
racks or parking.
On the property in an amount that is equal to at least 10% of the number of marked parking spaces in the parking lot.
I'd even say to 10% of the number of marked parking spaces in the parking lot rounded up to the nearest whole number.
Yeah, but at least gets us there anyway, right? Because
Sure.
it has to be at least 10%. And if you're doing 10%, you're doing 100% of a bike, right? So it gets us there without needing the rounded up language, I think.
It does. I'm used to writing code where you actually say rounded up to the nearest. Yeah.
How many unicycles though? How many?
Did that come through? It's a good change. Any other technical questions or edits before we go to public? Or I'm sorry, clarifying questions or edits before we go to public comment? If not, we will go to public comment.
Bet. Brandon, do we have public comment?
Ron, I was going to get you, but we're just opening up public comment now on the paid parking. Okay. Any other comments from folks in the room? Okay. And any comments from folks online?
Am I on?
You are.
Kathleen Chipeye, Magnolia Star Route. I just don't understand why this is moving through. The town right now, without an ordinance, has the right to charge for paid parking on town land, in commercial for sure. Zoning, neighborhood commercial, CBD, DDA area. Just like every other person that owns commercial property has the right. I get freaked out when I hear the town administrator say, we're going to allow you to have parking. Again, this is the United States of America. The code doesn't say you're not allowed to have parking in the CBD. It would make no sense if the code said you're not allowed to have parking in the CBD. And since the code doesn't say that, it's allowed right now. So I feel like a lot of time has been wasted on this. And we got to remember that we're in the United States of America, and the code doesn't dictate what's allowed. That's what happens in dictatorships and fascist, communist, Marxist places, okay? In the United States of America, you have the right unless you're limited by the code. you also, I don't believe, have the legal right to tell anybody how to operate their business. And I see that some of the things have been removed, most of the bad stuff earlier, but still, there's still things sitting in there that are just the bicycles, the whatnot. Again, are you making it? You're not the one with the private enterprise who knows how much money you need to make, and you don't get to limit people giving up 10% to bicycles, and of course, probably no one's going to charge for that. That's a loss of 10% of car park payment. Okay, it horrifies me. And when I hear we're going to allow parking, we're born with rights. We're born with them. And there's property rights that we're born with too, especially when you're in commercial zoning. So this horrifies me that this is moving along. You can go ahead and pass it, but anybody can do whatever they want about paid parking in commercial spaces. And if the town doesn't agree, then I guess the town will have to take that person to court, because there's high probability you're going to lose in court. It's commercial business.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Can I respond?
Of course.
As a matter of principle, I generally agree with the spirit of Kathleen's arguments as I understand them. And I'm curious to hear some commentary from Jennifer and perhaps Miranda on the topic of, I feel that unless something is specifically prohibited, we should assume freedom. And that tends to be how I see things and believe that they are. And I would like to believe that that's how we're regulating in our town. And so can you guys please speak to the merits of that notion or that concept? And as it pertains to this ordinance, and is it necessary for us to pass an ordinance if we're not already specifically prohibiting the use otherwise? If it's not, and if we're not specifically prohibiting it anywhere in our code, and it's therefore allowed, do we have to go through with this?
Isn't there, no, so it's a good question. I want the answer to. I just want to ask a question that you can answer at the same time. Isn't part of this whole thing the fact that the private landowner is limited to 20 spots, I think it is, and that's the whole issue of the IRS that makes this a problem? And isn't there already restrictions in there that are kind of problematic?
So first of all, I think one of the things that this ordinance does is it just clarifies that parking is allowed and where parking is allowed, and the parking is allowed as a primary use. Right now, there's nothing in the code that specifically says that parking is allowed as a primary use. It seems like that would be the case, that you could have parking lots throughout the town, but it doesn't specify that in the code. And there's language above the use group table that's not being changed right now, but there's language that says that if a use isn't identified in the use group table, then it is not permitted. So if you read that to the letter of what it says, because parking lots is not a principal use that's spelled out in the code, then town could prohibit all parking lots, regardless of if they're paid or not for pay, free or paid parking. And I don't think that's something that you want to do, and that's not consistent with what you have in town. So it does make sense to just specify and be clear as to what your goal is and what you would like for use as a property.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like section 1632B, the first sentence, any use that is not specifically permitted in this section shall be deemed to be a prohibited use. So that's actually how it's written. To assume that if it's not clarified, it's allowed is actually just, it says right there. And this is not new language. This is the
Right,
existing
I
language.
see. So, I am in favor of paid parking, and I'm in favor of this, what we're trying to achieve here, and in creating a clear, allowable use and a, language and a structure for doing it and executing it. I suppose, if I wanted to propose we change that language that underlines the use group table and say unless it's specifically prohibited, it's allowed, that would be a different topic and whole separate issue.
It would be, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's so many uses that you just don't even.
Yeah, well, I want to encourage innovation and creativity and the use of the imagination. I want to encourage people to try things rather than say, unless we've specifically spelled it out as something you can do, it can't be done. I think that's stifling our creativity and our advancement as a human race.
What I would encourage you to do is create a process for defining what uses that aren't specified, or a streamlined process for identifying whether a use is allowed in the code. You can expand this language here that's
Sure.
already existing and then say, what factors are you going to be looking at?
Yeah, so experimentation and creativity, if it's not addressed in our use group table, is an allowable use, I would say. For example, entrepreneurship, invention, trial and error.
Right, but not to the expense
Yeah.
of others, right? And that's the whole point.
Sure, of
That's the whole
course,
point of
but
building in these guardrails, right?
Yeah, but you're assuming that people exploring and trying things out is harming others. Like there's already laws against harming others. We don't need to prohibit things that we haven't imagined yet. But if somebody tries something new and it harms others, there's already laws against harming others.
It sounds a little abstract.
It is.
Yeah, I think you need to drill into something more
I think it's
concrete.
too abstract for code.
Well, it's too
Yeah,
abstract for
that
this
code can't
conversation
be
as well, but
abstract.
it's a fundamental problem with our code as it's written, in my opinion, and I think that's exactly what Kathleen is speaking to. And this was a response to Kathleen's comment, by the way. So I think if Kathleen wants to chime in, I'd be more than happy to see if I'm capturing the gist of what you're having a problem with, Kathleen, at this point. I have no further comments.
Ron, why don't you go ahead and Kathleen can chime in later when she comes back if you'd like to make a comment. Would you like to make a comment, Ron? You're welcome to.
Just read this proposed ordinance in section 3, line B. There's a statement to the effect that if the code doesn't allow it, it's whatever it is you might want to do, you can't. And I think that's vague. I did send an email around to you about this. I think it's unconstitutional. I think it violates section or the Bill of Rights in terms of the Fifth Amendment and the 15th Amendment. And I am very sure somewhere in the future that we will come to loggerheads, myself and the board, over this particular provision.
Sounds ominous and threatening. Just
Can-
want to
can
point
I-
that out.
Can I ask a question of the town attorney related
Yeah.
to that? Is this an uncommon language to use in town codes across the state and indeed across the country?
It is really not uncommon at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fairly typical.
Yeah, so
It's a protection. I mean, essentially what it is a protection. I mean, you don't have, I've looked through code, you don't have waste transfer station in your code. Do you want waste transfer stations to be allowed in any
Right.
zone district? because it's not specified?
Right, exactly. There are many uses that
Yeah, that's just
could
one
be
example.
potentially ridiculous and
Right.
absurd. Yeah. But might be very creative. But
Well, yes, and there's many that could be useful that aren't called out there too.
So this is in the existing code, like
Yeah, this is
just so we know, this isn't an amendment, this has been there, so.
This is
we
total
get
site
folks are
plan.
focusing on it, but just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, I feel like I'm done commenting on this. This is not the time or place for me to have this debate, so.
but this question is a matter of interpretation and a matter of opinion. It's not guaranteed at all, right? Like I have a completely different conception of what it means to have a property right, I suppose, than what's been articulated so far, right? Which is property rights, the only place that property rights come from, the only place, in my view, and I think it is logical, it comes from the government. That's where property rights come from. They don't come from some magical place in the sky, right? They're guaranteed by a society who writes laws to secure individual property rights, and they are always conditional. Always. All property rights are always conditional. And they're conditioned upon the society that grants them. We are that society. This is the way we do it. This is the way we grant property rights, through this process. So I don't think there's anything insidious about this at all. In fact, I think it is quite natural and in accordance with, Lockean and natural law. Anyway, as I said, this is a matter of philosophy. It's a matter of interpretation and opinion. It's not as clear cut as it's been articulated here.
Do we have more public comments?
Can I respond to Jesse?
Yes, thank you.
Kathleen Chibai. Jesse, yes, that is what I'm saying. And just because it is written in the Nederland Town Code does not mean it is constitutional. This is speckled throughout the code. And let me just say, if you're not born with rights and the government is granting you your rights, you're living in a communist country, okay? To say that to run a business, a commercial enterprise, when you're in commercial zoning, the town doesn't get to decide what commercial enterprise is. It is if you're zoned properly. Okay. Now, if you're going to put up a sewer plant right in the middle of town, obviously there's other regulations that come into factor. Okay. But parking in the central business district in the DDA, I mean, I don't understand what people don't understand. No, the government is not granting you your rights. You have all your rights when you're born, and then any law, the state statutes, they regulate those rights. And to this day, there's no regulation of parking in the central business district in the town of Nederland. You are not bypassing this, granting anyone a right. And Jesse, this does reach far beyond parking because it's the same thing in the animal ordinance language. We're telling you what animals you can have. If we didn't list it, it's illegal. That is not how the United States of America and our regulatory laws and rules work. It's just not. And yes, like I said, it's communist to say if it's not in the code, you can't have it. That's an authoritarian, totalitarian country that happens in. Not in Nederland, Colorado, okay? Not in the state of Colorado. And it blows my mind. People need to go back to civics, okay? And to have Jen Manson say, "Oh, this is speckled everywhere," it might very well be speckled everywhere. The only reason nothing's happened so far in Nederland is because no one takes you to court. No one has taken this to court. I'm going to tell you, you can take this to court, and the town is going to lose. Okay, if it's not in the code, it's illegal. Okay, let's remind ourselves what has composed and created these rules and language is less than 800 people in the total town that are adults. And not all of them are masters, and they didn't even get paid. Not all of them are masters of legal language or the Constitution.
You're responding to Jesse's,
Yeah,
This
I
isn't
know
really
I'm
another 3
responding.
minutes to
It is
roll.
a bigger scope. It's not just in this parking, but it's not the town allowing you to do something. It would be allowing you if you were changing the rules and there was a ban in downtown Nederland on parking. But there isn't, and there isn't anywhere a ban on parking in the commercial zoning. That doesn't make
So-
any sense. That's why it doesn't exist.
Thanks, Kathleen. Appreciate it. Do we have any other public comments for folks online or in the room? If not, we'll bring it back for discussion. A likely motion. I do,
So can I staff really quick?
oh yeah,
So you brought up the 20 spaces
Nick?
and
I'm looking at that too, yeah. Yeah.
mine is that really that 16201, 210.
16,210.
Striked from the code, and that's not in your ordinance. And so the recommendation is if you are interested in approving this, add that as another change that we would strike 16210.
16,210, what,
Design standards that say parking lots containing more than 20 spaces shall be designated as a special review use. That's contradictory since we're saying use by right.
that makes sense, because that was kind of where a lot of this, I mean, the whole rezoning of 100 First Street was around the fact that Ron could only have 20 parking spaces, or the IRS wasn't treating, it's just, that 20 was a big,
And back to
sticking
kind of
point.
the question of like, if it's not in the code, in that situation for that paid parking application, we ran under other commercial activity. And so, we kind of use some of those as means. And so this takes away the special reviews because we allow use by
And
right.
other commercial activity, yeah, requires an SRU.
Correct.
And I mean, it's shocking to me that we're getting complaints for making this use by right, which is, I mean, whether or not you think in your interpretation it already is use by right. We're making it use by right for sure now, and there's no interpretation, right? So we're resolving conflict of interpretation of the town code, which is what we should be doing.
No, we are back in discussion, yeah, yeah, and
Sorry, what is the section again that we would need to move to strike as well?
16-210.
'Cause I want to actually read it before I agree to
Yeah,
strike it.
it's 16210 design standards under the off-street parking section of code.
And it requires a
We
special.
did
review
finish
use.
public comment. We completed.
I just want to make a clarification for you. I guess
Oh.
it's public comment. There's no relationship between limited 20 parking spaces and what the IRS said. The IRS just simply said in all of the parking lots, you can't take the expenses off unless there's offsetting income.
Okay. Okay, so no matter the number of parking spots, what they're saying is you can't write off things unless you're making money to write off against.
That's right.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
The internet seems to be down for me. I don't know.
I've been struggling with the internet too.
Same issue. I'm happy I can also share screen. You're gonna have to walk over there, but
I'm trying, I can't pick up my own damn. Oh, we do have a request for a public comment from someone who's been there and unable to log on. Are we having a hard time? Well, we heard Kathleen, so. Go ahead. If you want to make a public comment, identify yourself and please go ahead.
Hi, Barbara Hart, 245 Apollo Drive. I just
Oh, we
wanted to
can hear
say, you can hear me now? I
Yeah.
couldn't get it to open before. We put up a post this morning, several hours ago on the Idaho Springs page, because that's who you guys keep asking or keep saying has done it right. And we asked people what they thought as residents and business owners. And primarily what I'm seeing is it doesn't work for them. People don't come eat there anymore. Worst thing they've ever seen in town. A couple people say as residents, they do find more parking closer to their homes. But most of it is negative comments. And I really wish you guys would leave it open and have a discussion with the entire community about
Absolutely.
paid parking before you move it forward, because I think it is a community conversation and should not be decided by a couple of people. Thank you.
And you said we, is it the Mountaineer posted this on online, social media?
On the Clear Creek page, yes, on their social media page, which covers Clear Creek County. And it says they have people from Georgetown that won't go eat or shop in Idaho Springs anymore. If they go to Idaho Springs, they just go to Safeway and they leave. They have fast food. It goes on and on and on about how it doesn't work for them, for their community.
Thanks. Thank you.
On that note, is there any, do we have any indication of sales tax revenue before and after paid parking was implemented in Idaho Springs?
I know I can get it. I don't think I can grab it for you right this moment.
No, we don't have it on hand.
Now, I would say the Idaho Springs staffing team, their sentiment is different. That they didn't see a major impact. They did talk about the need to do a pretty robust education outreach, and that's what they did, but they have not seen that. But I can get their stats for you.
I wonder if there's any general knowledge of before and after paid parking is implemented around sales tax revenue for communities throughout the country.
How many communities did you?
I mean, I'm not asking, I'm saying I might ask.
400,000.
No, I'm just saying if there's like a generally, if it's generally known or not, if it affects commerce positively or negatively. I'll do a quick Google search myself.
I do also want to remind the board that there was a survey that was put out about paid parking, and of course it was relatively split, but many of the sentiments were if residents can park for free, or if there can be the 15-minute grace period, which is why those are important to town staff to make sure we incorporate if we're able to move forward with paid parking. But that survey was done, and there was a twofold survey. It was residents, and then there was also a very specific business survey.
And were they both pretty split? Businesses? What about the business survey?
I mean, generally the sentiment was split, but then, a lot of people said, like, I'm against this unless you allow for the 15-minute grace period or you allow for the residential. And happy to bring that back, guess I really just, again, kind of like the Teens Inc. proposal, this is not about town's paid parking proposal. This is about, again, allowing the use. We, of course, are going to come back to you when it's time to execute the contract with interstate parking, should that go forward, to talk through all of this. But that's really not what's being discussed. This is the use group table and allowing the use.
It's true. It isn't, but it's a precedent thing. So I guess that's where it's related. What else do the trustees think? Trustees? Oh, did actually real quick, did you read 16.210? Did you? Here, I have it on my phone, just so you want to know whether striking the entire thing. Okay. Okay, what other comments do we have?
So it would be looking to strike only the first sentence from section 16-210, or because we want to keep adequate drainage facilities shall be provided, curb or wheel stops may be provided.
No more. Sorry, Ron. We're past public comment.
Am I understanding correctly?
So it's just the first sentence of 16.210.
I don't remember, like drainage and things like that are not included in the new proposed ordinance anywhere.
No, and then just a reminder, obviously under the multimodal transportation plan, this whole article of code related to off-street parking will be evaluated further. But yes, I think to avoid inconsistencies in code, that first sentence will need to be removed. And so that could be a part, if you're ready to approve this, this could be a part of your motion with those following changes. I believe there's 4 as it stands right now. Changes.
Sorry, I know this is a minor thing, but just to get it right, the bike, the bike thing. Was the intention of the planning commission to say, for instance, if there are 100 spaces, there should be 10 bike racks? Is that the,
Or 10 bike spaces, bike parking spaces.
or just enough space for 10 bikes?
Well, the way that the bike shows up in other sections of code, and it's a little different here. It says, you know, in all, that there needs to be at least 3 bicycle parking spaces or 10% of the required off-street parking spaces, whichever is greater.
So that's,
But we just didn't do the 3 parking spaces. We just said the 10%.
Still 3 bike spots would have to be
Now, the planning commission did not
No.
discuss the,
not one bike rack.
the planning commission didn't discuss the bikes. So I can't give you their weigh-in.
I'm just, because, yeah. So, I mean,
You may want to come on. Yeah.
I think what you just said is clear. Could you repeat it?
So the current referencing code says that at least 3 bicycle parking spaces or 10% of the required off-street parking spaces, whichever is greater, is required. Caveat though, is they have a moratorium on the way parking is counted in the CBD. So that gets a little tricky if you try to use that code exactly as it's written.
Why?
They have a moratorium on how parking counts in the CBD.
On parking counts or on parking?
Parking, how we require parking count, that is a moratorium on required parking counts and parking enforcement in the CBD.
With this doesn't impact our moratorium, or the reason for us putting the moratorium in place is not in any way benefited by this ordinance, correct?
No, because again, the way parking is calculated is by use, and what's happening here is the use is the parking. So the parking
Gotcha.
count doesn't come into place because your parking count is more like you have a library, you need X amount of parking spaces per square footage. So if parking is the use, the parking, the challenge with leaving 2 or 16 to 10 is that we would still only be prohibiting parking lots to 20 spaces. And the visitor center, for example, is more than 20 spaces. So I think it's beneficial to remove that. So you could have a parking as a use, whether it's a use or paid parking, if it's 2 spaces or if it's 30 spaces, the parking is allowed to be the use.
so in order to get the language to, whether I agree with it or not, I'm just trying to get the language to the planning commission's intention here. If we were to say something like, the private property owner or designated operator is required to provide publicly accessible bicycle racks on the property in a sufficient amount to accommodate a number of bicycles equal to at least 10% of the number of marked parking spaces in the parking lot. If we said that, then we would have covered all of our bases, I think.
Sounds clear.
You said provide accessible provide accessible
publicly accessible
bicycle.
bicycle racks in a sufficient amount to accommodate a number of bicycles equal to at least 10% of the number of marked parking spaces.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
Just-
Because we're using the word racks, but then we're saying it a sufficient amount, which, yeah.
I mean, I know this is not like the main thing here, but
We love those bikes. We love bikes. I do anyway. I think I'm in good company.
pretty scared of bikes.
I'm recovering from a broken collarbone from the bike too. So for good reason.
What other comments? Tanya and Nicole, what are you thinking out there?
I'm ready to pass this. Yeah, I mean, I still think the bike edition is silly and definitely feels like an infringement upon somebody's right to make money in the way they wish to make money. But I'm not gonna fight it, so I'm just like ready to pass this with all the changes that have been mentioned.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, I think that there's been, like Miranda had said, that there's been the surveys. They battled it around in the PC for a while, regarding of whether or not, because Jesse, I had looked into this at one point earlier on in terms of do municipalities see a certain drop in sales tax revenue? And I think there's a lot of contingencies on that. It depends on, hey, is there a town nearby that offers similar shopping or eating experience, right? Like Miranda had said, it depends on how you educate folks about it. Um, it also, depends on where public transport, like walking or biking, are viable alternatives that can impact, paid parking. So I think that there is, and that initially some towns do see a little bit of a drop, but in the long run, that it evens out. I do appreciate Barbie bringing up some of that feedback. I will tend to notice that people in general, even when they're giving feedback to us, it's typically folks that are against it. And Barb, I don't know if you can, speak to whether there's been any, positive comment on it. But I'm kind of leaning that this would be okay for me to pass tonight.
Did you want me to look for other comments on the thread?
Nicole, did you hear Barb's question?
I did not. Sorry, what was your question, Barb?
Did you want me to look for other comments on the thread that are positive comments?
Sure. Yeah, if you've got any of those. I did do initial search also on Idaho Springs, Colorado. This needs to be verified, and so I'm not quite sure, just like I said, it needs to be verified. But it says that paid parking did not lead to a drop in shopping and sales tax revenue for Idaho Springs. In fact, Mayor Mike Hillman reported that sales tax revenues had increased by more than 7% annually over the past 3 years. This increase also coincided with a period of more people exploring and thriving in the downtown area. So
Right.
again, it's another piece of data that would just need to be verified. But initially, it looks like there was not a negative impact to the sales tax for Idaho Springs.
When I
Sorry,
bring
thank you.
this back before you if this passes and town can do paid parking, I'm happy to bring Jonathan's data because that's the same sentiment that he shared with me, Jonathan Kane, who implemented this whole program and studied it and continues to tweak it, is that it did not have a negative impact for them. So I'll work on grabbing all of their data.
But they shut down the paid parking for almost a year in the middle of COVID too. We were going over there. They weren't charging anything
Sure, that's
for a
that I won't pull. I guess
Yeah.
I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I just know that that's what happened. So yeah.
I mean, the only problem with evaluating it that way, right, based on sales tax, is that it's a very general evaluation and doesn't really consider the impacts on individual businesses who might be geographically located in a way that is, that paid parking would be particularly damaging to them. I just think that Barb's point, if taken, right, should not necessarily be tied to a general, right, notion of business and sales tax collected. And I think that her initial points in previous meetings have been, this is going to negatively impact a certain part of town, right? And I think that that's how we should continue to consider it. Just throwing that out there. Not that I'm saying I'll be against it, just that that's my consideration.
And I think a lot of the businesses are being damaged now by employees parking right in front of their businesses.
Agreed.
And I'd like to see that they can do that if they want to pay for it.
I'd be happy to summarize everything that's being included in this conversation and other ones we have on other pages, which are the people that live in the communities that you're talking about, and bring it back to you in a couple of weeks. If you could just wait to push things forward until more information can be provided. And it's not from the company that implemented it, it's from the people that live there and the businesses that are in the community. And we only opened the conversation today and it's growing. And I think that it's great information that we could share with you from the people's perspective that are in the Idaho Springs and even Georgetown and that pretty much corridor right there on I-70.
I'm disinclined to delay.
I'm just
You're
inclined to delay
disinclined
this
to
particular
delay, is that what you said?
ordinance because I don't think that either way it would change my mind or on whether or not paid parking should be allowed in these districts. Right? I do think it should be allowed in these districts. That doesn't mean that we go forward with the implementation of interstate parking and all the paid parking on town-owned lots. Doesn't necessarily mean that.
Right.
Right. But what we're adjusting here is that it is allowed to have paid parking in these districts. And I think that shouldn't really change.
Yeah, this has been, there will always be blowback. We've debated this for almost 2 years now. We've surveyed, we've taken a lot of input. And I just hate to, yeah, I agree with it. There's a narrow definition on what we're deciding. I'd like to decide.
All right. I think I have it written down here, so I can do it.
You have the,
Let me just get to what page is the motion on?
on page 92.
Oh, I was way far away. Sorry. 92.
Yeah, the new one is 99.
We got a new packet yesterday.
I guess on our agendas, we should, Miranda, put the time of day at the bottom.
Yeah. Sorry, folks. There we go. So I would move to approve ordinance 853, amending section 16-32 of chapter 16 of the Nederland Municipal Code to allow for parking lots and paid parking operations in certain zone districts and adopting regulations for paid parking operations with the following changes. One moment, sorry. Those changes being that in section 11-102(5), we amend that text to read, the private property owner or designated operator is required to provide publicly accessible bicycle racks on the property in a sufficient amount to accommodate a number of bicycles equal to at least 10% of the number of marked parking spaces in the parking lot. And additionally, to strike the first section of article, is this article 16? Sorry.
Section.
Section 16
Section
210.
16-210. Do you want me to read that? So we're striking the language as follows. Parking lots containing more than 20 spaces shall be designated as special review uses. That's my motion.
And
I
what about you? You have two more.
And I had one,
So
actually you have to say them now. Yeah.
the other thing that was discussed is grammatical changes.
Oh,
at
sorry, the
12.
grammatical change.
And removing the definition of paid parking zone in section
Thank you.
11-101.
Two additional changes to the motion. I'm losing all of my notes. That we will remove in section 11-101 definitions. The definition paid parking zone means an area designated by official traffic control devices in which a vehicle may be lawfully parked with the required form of consideration. That should be removed. And that we amend for grammatical reasons where is that?
It's in footnote
In the
12.
footnote 12 of section 16-32 use groups, where it says HDR residential zones, which are also located in Nederland Downtown Development Authority District. Is there anything else I missed?
I don't think so. And I'd second.
Okay, yeah, you got that footnote grammatical thing in there.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, Casey?
Mayor Billy,
No, still believe in paid parking as a gateway drug to towns going south, so no.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Trustee Corvalon,
Yes.
Trustee Sterling,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahone,
Yes.
and Trustee Severs.
Yes.
Thank you.
Or careful dabbling on your gateway drugs, people. All right, with that, the motion did pass. So the amendment to the use group table for paid parking is approved. With that, we are moving to, back to my title page, sorry, our fifth, 5.5, the Housing Needs Assessment Administrative Variance Ordinance. Brenda?
So I'd like to just do, so if you notice on the aims, I have a lot of kind of repetitive, here's how we got here statements. So I'm going to do it one time. And this applies to all of the ordinances. So obviously the town of Nederland is a part of the Housing Planning Program grant in which you are working on a housing needs assessment. Under the housing program grant, though, one of the requirements is not only completing your housing needs assessment, but adopting at least one municipal code change. We're ambitious here in that we identified 4 opportunities for changes, and that's what we worked on. We have contracted with Bohannon Houston, and they're working on finalizing that housing needs assessment. And so that will come to you next week for an official presentation. But based on the data that was obtained through interactive maps, workshops, feedback through emails, phone calls, and a housing survey, we really compiled a list of possible changes that could be considered to the code. The initial thing we did was review them with a peak-to-peak Housing and Human Services Alliance Housing Subcommittee. And then later, the Planning Commission formed their own Housing Needs Assessment Subcommittee that consisted of Mayor Pro Tem Mahold and Vice Chair Reese. When we brought it to the Housing Subcommittee within the Planning Commission, we were really focusing on 4 strategies. The first being allow small square footage residential units and small square footage lot sizes, developing flexibility in land occupancy requirements, increase town support and clarify procedures for the development of affordable and diverse housing options, and identify opportunities to expedite the development review process for affordable housing development. Before I go on, I do want to note that, of course, we did identify, plant investment fees and tap fees being a barrier for housing, but recognize that we're not the subject matter experts there. You're budgeting for a rate study. You should really allow Raftellus to come forward, and their intention and their scope of work is to ensure there's an affordability component. So that's not lost in this whole process, but that's above and beyond what we as town staff feel comfortable offering, because you should have the data to back that up. So from those 4 strategies, we really focus specifically on 4 code changes: the development of accessory dwelling units before primary structures, administrative variances, alternative housing in the use group table, and yard and bulk variances. For ease of your ordinance, we've broken these up into 4 separate ordinances for you to vote on independently. So this one is an administrative variance. Since I've been with town, we are seeing quite a few non-conforming lots come before the Board of Zoning Adjustment, but there's slight deviations. For example, in low density, you need a 16,000 square feet, but we ran a BZA application for 15,880. So it's just shy of the 16,000 threshold. But nonetheless, there is no administrative authority to approve a variance that is just slightly under. And so we really feel that there's value in, instead of running someone through the really costly and lengthy process to go before the BZA, that we're asking for approval for town to do in a 15% deviation for our all yard and bulk requirements, except for height. Want to leave height at 35. But an example here is if your setback is 30 feet, we could go down to 25.5 administratively, and then anything larger would have to go before the Board of Zoning Adjustment. The Planning Commission, this one, they've spent a lot of time with these housing ordinances, but this one was kind of an easy pass for them in many ways. They actually unanimously voted to recommend approval back in October. We just couldn't get it before you last month because of other action items. So this one felt appropriate to them. To allow staff to be able to have that 15% deviation. So if you're comfortable with passing this ordinance, you have the motion to approve ordinance 851. amending the chapter 16 of the town municipal code to allow for certain administrative variances. You can also approve it with changes or you can deny it.
Thank you.
Miranda, will neighbors be informed and given their opportunity to discuss it with you?
Not under an administrative variance under this code as written. I think the feeling is 15% is really a minor deviation.
Yeah, except we made those numbers for a reason.
Sure. And I think as staff, I think what we've noticed when things come before the Board of Zoning Adjustment is that they're always passed. I mean, you are starting to see more non-conforming lots coming forward where, you know, the yard and bulk table was adopted after the lots were subdivided. And so there's a whole subdivision as you come into town off of Boulder Canyon Drive that are all non-conforming lots because they were subdivided first. So I think that's why the kind of thought is give staff some administrative authority. And if it's not 15%, that's something you can discuss, but give staff some administrative authority to be able to work with land developers and this just removes a barrier. If your lot is slightly non-conforming, you have to go through a whole process to get it approved under the Board of Zoning Adjustment, where we as staff would love the opportunity to do it with them administratively and allow them to continue with their build process instead of holding them up in order to get a Board of Zoning Adjustment hearing scheduled.
And just so we're clear, this doesn't mean you're automatically going to approve everything that's within 15%. You're going to give it a hard look as we expect you to do as the land administrator, right? This is to you.
Sorry, one more time.
This doesn't assume that everything that's within 15% gets passed. It means you're gonna take a hard look at it, and if it's your judgment that we're relying on for 15%, but it's not an automatic pass.
Right. I mean, as an administrative variance, we are of course always going to assess like what's the minimum relief needed. But in many ways, these are your lot sizes. Like you can't even develop your lot if you're supposed to have 16,000 square feet and you only have 15,900. Currently, you cannot build on it unless you go for a BZA variance. There's a very high likelihood the BZA is going to approve that variance. So I think the thought is allow staff the space to be able to approve that variance.
Yeah, and to Tanya, remember BZA only meets once a quarter at best. So you're forcing somebody to wait for a long time. When we're looking at all the things out of the housing study that we could agree on, you know, we had to pick a handful that we thought we could implement fairly easily. This one rose right to the top when we were looking at it on the PC.
Yeah, I was on the BZA for like almost 4 years, and it does seem like sometimes it's just so much busy work and cost and wait for something that just it would be just, you know, totally illogical to not pass, you know, a variance. So it does seem like it's really trying to reduce the burden for residents, which I like. And you know, one thing I also saw a little bit with Constance, and I can't remember where people like, you know, even that few inches, you know, the neighbors just didn't want to budge on anything. I think something came to the BZA, and so it's, you know, it could be kind of weaponized. Those few inches or those few feet can be weaponized a little bit, and
They have been, yeah.
and they have been, yeah, definitely. And so I think this seems like a really simple and straightforward and, you know, good thing for us to do along the lines with our housing needs assessments.
Yeah, I trust your team, Miranda, to make good judgments. 15% doesn't seem like we're giving up a lot, especially given the number of lots that are non-conforming and nothing else can be done about it.
I just want to draw attention to kind of some of the language in here that says, you know, no more, it may not exceed 15%. And so again, that's kind of the ability to assess what's the minimum relief needed. Any request above 15% goes to the BZA, and that the zoning administrator reserves the right, even if the request is under 15, if there are complexities with that lot or concerns, that they reserve the right to move this before the BZA for review if needed. So yes, I think the ask is that you are putting trust into your planning and zoning staff, your zoning administrator to make appropriate decisions for these non-conforming lots that just need minor variations.
And is it still true that if you were to deny a variance within that 15%, that the property owner or developer could still bring that to the BZA.
Yes.
Like, it's not here in this particular language. But we already have a process for that, so I assume it would simply go through that process. This wouldn't stop the process.
Right.
Right,
It
and
just
there's-
allows, it's an easier step.
Right.
And there is nothing literally that prevents somebody who is disapproved by a BZA to come back and try it again.
Right.
In the law right now.
Right. So even in that case.
Yeah.
So this doesn't give town staff any extra powers really, other than to make things easier for folks who are trying to use land that they own in the way that they desire.
In a time frame that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, Billy and I have been on these BZA things where sometimes people just come in cranky. And I don't think they get heard very well. And somebody that's only doing something once a quarter isn't necessarily at the top of their game. Always.
Any clarifying questions for Miranda or on staff?
I guess I am still, the language here, the zoning administrator reserves the right to determine whether a variance request should be processed as a standard Board of Zoning review pursuant to section 16-232 and 16-233 of chapter 16. It's that language that concerned me. Just because it seems like you could say no with that language.
I think the way I interpret that is that I reserve the right to have the BZA.
Right. I know what you intended, but I'm thinking, could that language be used against the intention? I just want to make sure that we're not putting it in there that someone can block someone from going in front of the BZA.
Where specific, can you tell me where that language
It's
is?
number 4 in section 16-235.
Thanks.
Sorry, number B4.
You mean so the zoning administrator reserves the right to determine?
Whether, which seems to suggest that they could say, I don't approve your variance request, and no, it will not go in front of the BZA. I just don't want that to be possible.
Any ideas on like wording or?
Well, I guess I'm not enough of an expert on section 16-232 and 233 because it's referencing those to know whether or not that poses an issue. Or we could just, I don't know.
It doesn't say anything about denial in there, so that it doesn't say that if the town administrator denies, then the town administrator has the ability to determine whether it can be processed through the BZA.
Yeah, I guess, and I realize this is just me, but I guess the way I interpret this is if I'm not inclined to say yes, I'm bringing it to the BZA.
Right.
They're going to make the decision.
But could you say no? It's not going in
I
front of the
don't
BZA.
view that that's how this code
Okay.
is. I view it as it's
That's
either
my
I'm
concern.
approving it or I'm sending it to the BZA.
Yeah, I know you would not, but does this code allow a town administrator to do that?
It's also not in the BZA section that the town administrator has any authority to, is a gatekeeper.
So what is the process to get in front of the BZA?
An application essentially.
Okay.
And fees. And I think that's what we're also recognizing is that these are hardships we have put on people who have minimal needs for variances. And yet they have to pay a substantial amount of money to go before board to more than likely in my history, get like a 2-second yes, because their relief is so minimal.
I see this sentence here as if you've got a property owner that comes and there's a lot of controversy, there's neighbors coming and the town administrator doesn't really want to be in the position of making that decision.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ensure we weren't baking into the code an ability for the town administrator to do that.
I don't think we are from what I'm reading.
Yeah, that sentence just, it bothers me a little. I mean, maybe we could add a sentence somewhere in here that just said, if denied, the application will go before the BZA. Can we say that?
If the
May.
may go before the BZA.
Yeah, the applicant may.
The applicant may, yeah.
Yeah.
If denied, the applicant may,
May file an application
thank you.
Yeah.
under, I'd have to figure out what section. It's probably 16-232.
Yeah, I think it is.
Would that help?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah, I think
Yeah, I think that's important.
for future tyrants, we need.
Yeah, despite my property rights diatribe, I'm trying to preserve them.
Yeah, right, now that I have them.
Yeah.
With, how about the folks, Tanya and Nicole, how are you feeling?
Clarifying questions at this point.
I would like to hear public comment before I make any other statements.
Tanya?
Yeah, same.
Okay, we'll move to public comment on action item 5.5, housing needs assessment administrative variance of 15% ordinance. If you have any comments? Now's the time. Doesn't seem like anyone in the room does. Anyone online have any comments? If not, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion and a motion. Tanya or Nicole, did you have anything you wanted to say?
No.
Yeah, yeah, I see this as streamlining the process and creating less burden on folks, property owners. I'm perfectly fine with adding in Eric's suggestion, but I'm ready to pass this.
Thank you. Any comments from trustees in the room?
I echo Nicole's comments.
I do too. Jesse, anything else you want to say on this? So, Eric, do you have the wording with regards to how do you want to make
It's
this
in
motion?
section 16-233. So maybe we could say pursuant to 16-233.
Yes.
So something, sorry, I'm trying to on the fly.
16233 is procedure.
If you just want to say, you move to approve this ordinance and with an amendment that a paragraph is added that if the town administrator denies the request, then the applicant may file an application pursuant to 16-233.
All right, and we'll be adding, we'll determine where to add that paragraph later.
Yes.
I move to approve ordinance 851 amending Article 9 of Chapter 16 of the Town of Nederland Municipal Code to allow for certain administrative variances with the following changes: that a paragraph be added that states that should an application for a variance be administratively denied, then the applicant may submit their application to the Board of Zoning Adjustment pursuant to section 16-233.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or friendly amendments? If not,
Unfriendly amendments?
friendly, unfriendly, very hostile. Good neighborly. Macy?
Trustee Corvalon,
Yes.
Trustee Severs,
Yes.
Trustee Sterling,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahon,
Yes.
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
and Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The motion passes. With that, we'll move right into 5 point. Actually, does anyone need a break or are you guys able to self? Okay. Thank you. We're going to move right into 5.6 housing needs assessment for ADUs.
So similar to, again, there are 4 strategies. So the second strategy that we discussed is accessory dwelling units before primary structure. So currently the code as written does not allow you to construct an accessory dwelling unit before your primary structure. So you will see that that is a strike through under section 1698 in order to allow ADUs to be constructed first. And we've actually seen this come forward a lot, and where individuals want to construct an ADU so they can live in their accessory dwelling unit while they build their primary structure, but code prohibits that. And so that was really why this got brought forward. But in the series of discussions with the Planning Commission, at first town staff had recommended that the primary structure, that's a parcel, could have more than one ADU, and that perhaps both the ADU and the primary home could be rented. The Planning Commission really felt like the only change they wanted to see would be to allow ADUs before primary structures. So this code does not include any language about allowing more than one ADU, and the owner must own and occupy either the ADU or the primary structure. So they both can't be available for rental. When we were getting ready to pass this with the Planning Commission, it was noted by 2 commissioners that if you're going to build your ADU first, you should really adhere to primary setbacks instead of accessory setbacks, which are smaller. And so we did add a portion to the use group, or to the yard and bulk table, that talks about, if there's an accessory dwelling unit, that you'll see similar yard and bulk standards to a primary principal use instead of an accessory use. So again, just to reiterate, the 2 changes here are this yard and bulk to adding in accessory dwelling unit so that all setbacks mirror principal uses, and to strike out the language that prohibited constructing an ADU before a primary residence. So those are just 2 simple changes. This will, I do think, have a very large impact in our community, because so many people are deterred from coming to build because they can't build a small structure prior to the principal structure.
And so, so in a situation like mine, there's a lot of cabins in town that have land where the primary residence could be built. I mean, outside of Old Town, are there other parcels like that?
Yeah, I mean, again, you can even go back to your non-conforming lots. If you are able to then build upon those lots, it's more, it works for people from a cost perspective to be able to build a small structure while they work on their large primary home. And so if we're saying you can't even live on your lot, that you have to build the primary structure, it deters people from wanting to come develop here. Where the benefit of allowing an accessory dwelling unit to be constructed before principal is that you end with 2 units at the end of the build, and then hopefully that ADU is converted to a long-term rental or something else. And it just adds to our housing stock. But telling a builder or a developer, you have to build that primary first, and then you can build your accessory, just really does not make sense. And that code as written prohibits people from doing what seems for us as staff, and I think Planning Commission and that subcommittee, that this is a really easy, quick change with a major impact.
Yeah, I think you can shave quarters off of development times. Yeah, this is another one that when we looked at the housing study and had to start to rank what we were willing to sign up for, we didn't get a lot of pushback on this one. The only qualification we had was that was the setback, the yard and bulk change, which was a good catch at the time. So from watching this come up through Planning Commission, I'm completely comfortable with it.
Oh, hey, this is Tanya. I'm a little confused as to why both units couldn't be rented out, why somebody has to be living in one of them.
We just we brought that up. Planning Commission, we're not saying tonight that they can't, but Planning Commission felt not.
But I think personally, I would like to allow that to happen.
I
units to be
personally would
rented.
too, but that's not what we're adjudicating on now. But
Well, we could.
I don't think we're gonna do it tonight, but you and I should talk about this.
No, it's an interesting idea. I don't know whether
I don't
it's a
understand
step that
why.
has to be taken tonight or not, but we can keep talking about it. This is clarifying question time, which
I
this
just
might
can't
be-
understand again why that's even in the code in the first place. That if I had an ADU, I would have to live in both of them. It's not like, I understand for short-term rental that one or the other should be lived in with a primary owner, perhaps that, but long-term renting, I thought we were trying to encourage that.
So again, I think it's important to note that this language has already been in this code. So as staff, originally we had recommended removing it and allowing to remove the kind of the ownership statements. But the planning commission felt it was appropriate to leave that in. And so that's why that was not removed, and it still is in your code that there needs to be, the owner of the parcel needs to own and occupy one of the structures.
And was the reasoning for that for the fear of one of them or, turning into short-term rentals?
I think the fear was what happened in Breckenridge and Telluride and a few other towns where everything got turned into rentals, and cannibalized. Or it changed I know it from being in Breckenridge, it changed the feel of the town. We'd have all these gigantic dark houses, with ADUs behind them that were also empty. And then the other flip side is during President's Day weekend, every house was occupied with people nobody knew.
But that's short-term rental. I mean,
Yeah.
we could say restricting that, one must be long-term rented. I mean, there's things that we could do to prevent that. I just think we need more rentals, long-term rentals in the town, and
Yep, I agree with you.
I think it's an easy, wording where you say that, only one could be short-term rental.
Tanya, you and I have 2 more years to work on this.
I know, but
I-
I just don't know why it isn't in here right now. We're here
I agree
now.
with Tanya.
Okay. So what do you
I
say?
mean, so do I.
Well, then, okay, so what you're saying is okay, I've got somebody in my cabin, my ADU cabin now. If I took a job in Atlanta and wanted to rent my main house out,
Yeah.
I'd be allowed to do so.
I mean,
Yeah.
a long-term renter is a member of the community just as much
Very
as
much.
any homeowner is.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll take that job.
I mean, no, we need you to stay town. But yeah, I mean, the short-term rental, I get that. I've walked around towns like that too, and they're all dark. We're not talking about that. I think we could easily just say, to restrict the short-term rental to be only one of the homes. That's it. That's all you gotta
But
say.
from a procedural standpoint, we're on 5.5, or I'm sorry, 5.6. It's not within the scope. I think we may
Right.
have a good argument, but I'd like to bring it back.
We
I
couldn't
guess
add
I'm
that?
getting confused here.
Okay.
Could someone help me out? Because I'm seeing a struck out primary residence
Yeah,
requirement.
same.
Oh, I
But
missed
what-
that.
Yeah, on page.
Yeah, so section 16-98,
Yeah, I was gonna bring this up as well.
A1A. Primary residence requirement, either the principal dwelling unit or accessory dwelling unit on the parcel or lot must be owner occupied is crossed out.
I think we like that.
Yeah, we like that. And then they also crossed it out down below under B or
B1.
Right.
One
Well,
B.
the proof of
B.
primary residency
Right.
is also eliminated from this ordinance language. So
Because what we were saying is that the owner can occupy either or. And so that got removed from the application for an ADU. Because the sentiment of the planning commission was that they could occupy either one.
Okay, but in the situation where the property, the owner does move or whatnot, then they wouldn't be able to rent that out, their accessory dwelling unit, or
with this language, they would be able to.
But this says that the statement of primary residence, an owner could choose to primary occupy their ADU, not the primary residence, and it's that primary residence that then gets rented out. Before, the way the code is now is that you have to own a primary residence, you have to be the owner of the primary residence, and then you can apply for an ADU permit. But we wanted to allow owners to be able to choose what they wanted to occupy. So if they don't want to occupy their primary structure, they want to live in the tiny home on their property and rent that out, they can.
They already can under the code, though. because it says either the principal dwelling unit or accessory dwelling unit must be owner occupied. And that's what we're crossing out. I guess I'm confused what we're doing here.
Yeah, I'm confused too.
I don't see
The-
any
the main
prohibition
thing-
on long-term rentals either.
No.
There's nothing that says you can't rent out your primary residence and your ADU.
Right. Unless we left this stricken language in section 16-98 in, which we're amending to allow neither to be owner occupied, right?
Yeah, you're
Like
right.
originally we were requiring at least one of those structures to be owner occupied.
Mhm.
Now we're requiring neither of those structures to be owner occupied.
I'm game.
And Miranda, because this was originally town's recommendation, can you articulate for everyone why that was originally town's recommendation?
Wasn't at the meeting. Oh, yes, I can tell you why it was our recommendation. I can't tell you necessarily fully what happened at the meeting. So, as town staff, we felt like the more rentals, the better. And that's why we wanted this. That's why the planning commission, subcommittee also agreed. We felt like if people want to build a principal and an accessory and then go off and rent them both long-term, that's incredible. We love it. And so, again, I wasn't at the meeting where I recall receiving feedback and hearing that that's not what the planning commission wanted. Again, fully support though, and to Attorney Madsen's point, this could all stay as is to allow the dual rental. We agree with Trustee Corvalon, the more rentals, the better.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we like the house we spent 2 years building, we saw things we'd like to do better, and I could see building another home and putting both these on the market as rentals. We'll see if my wife agrees, but
So my question then, to be clarified, is can anybody point me to where in this ordinance language we are making a change that now allows people to live in their ADU before a primary residence structure is constructed?
Yes, so it's the removal of 1698A1A, where it says primary residence required, either principal structure or accessory dwelling unit on the parcel must be owner occupied. And, all right, this came up the planning commission. That statement of requiring a primary residency and the section that's crossed out below about the statement of primary residency, you can't apply for an ADU permit if you don't have a primary residence. So we need to remove all this language regarding primary residency so that you can pursue an ADU before a principal structure.
Got you. I mean, it does seem like that language is vague enough that you could have done that anyway.
I
But
think as staff, we've never felt that way. To us, it feels cleaner to remove, because even the application says, please provide ownership of your primary structure. So when people say, oh, I want to apply for my ADU and you don't have a primary structure, we deny the application.
Got you. So it really is that second, that B in, oh my gosh, in B1B of section 1698. That language is really removing the primary residence existence requirement.
Right, because then
Gotcha.
when you seek your application for your accessory dwelling unit, we're not asking about any primary structure, because there's an understanding that you're going to construct your primary structure.
And then removing section 16-98A1A does what Tanya just suggested, which is allows for an owner to live in neither residence. Great.
and then does that
Um,
change our ADU code? Do we have to create a new class where there is, no, I guess we don't. This is already
No.
taken care of.
Well, that was added to the zoning districts and requirements table,
Correct,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Now,
The only thing that's not articulated, I think Attorney Madsen, if I heard correctly, you had mentioned this, that there's nothing that's stipulated about long-term rental requirements.
Yeah, there's
So-
nothing that prohibits renting both for long-term rentals.
right. So both would be allowed.
Correct.
But would we want to be in the situation? Well, what is, Miranda, STR language, does that only allow one STR on the property? So
Correct.
like, we wouldn't be in a situation where both could be STRs.
Well, currently, although it's being worked on, right, by the planning commission, currently you're allowed to hold two separate license types. So you could have a class a ADU license type plus a primary residence, host present or host not present under the current code as written. But again, that is being well worked on. But I also, yeah, you're right. Attorney Mattson is going to note that in this ordinance, we say you can have, no, I think it says that you can
Have both. You can't have, so this is already in the language of the code. It wasn't added. But you can't have short-term rental of an accessory unit and short-term rental of a principal dwelling unit. That's prohibited under 1698A1, and it's the new C.
Mhm. Mhm.
Oh, yeah, see.
And principal dwelling unit and primary residence, those two terms, are they the same thing or do they mean something different legally?
They're the same.
Okay.
Because you have your principal structure, which is your dwelling unit, and then your accessory structure is also a dwelling unit. But, and
Oh, I guess primary
residence-
is a different thing. Yeah, it's, yeah.
So that's saying you cannot do both, but you could do one as a short-term rental.
Right,
But you could do both as long-term rental because it's not prohibited.
right.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Yep, I see it.
So are we saying that this code is written how I wanted it to be written?
Yep, that's what we're saying.
All right, then. Make a motion to approve it.
Well,
Sorry, we have to take it to the public.
I think it's, yeah, and this was, to be fair, this was also originally town's request, was that there wasn't a primary residence requirement.
Oh, yeah, thanks. We need to make a motion to extend. I will make a motion to extend. I'll go ahead and say,
Second.
I'll say till 10:30. Second, we have a motion and a second.
Discussion. I'll agree if we stand up for the duration of the remaining minutes.
Stand at will. Macy?
All right, trustee Corvalon,
Yes.
trustee Severs,
Yes.
trustee Sterling,
No,
Mayor Pro Tem Mahone,
Yes.
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
and trustee Coombs Ismail.
yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, Nicole.
oh, you guys all suck. I'll get you back somehow.
So go ahead with, someone was making a point, I believe, when.
I was just finishing, yeah, my thought is, so this is originally what town had suggested as well, so it's sort of like we're coming around to just kind of all being in agreement. You know, if the PCs, yeah, I'm still not quite sure, like town was suggesting this on because we'll have more rentals. Still not quite sure exactly what the PC's concern was of, not having the primary resident requirement if we've got the STR, short-term rental, the A1C stipulation in there. So I get if Tom or anybody else has any other color to add to that, that would be helpful. But I'm just trying to figure out if there was just something we're missing here with that.
I think maybe we're chalking it up to a misunderstanding. I cannot comment. I was not there. But I think, again, I don't think, I'm not concerned, I guess, if you move forward with this and allowing long-term, that's a great. Housing stock is housing stock in whatever
Right.
format it comes.
That seems like more consistent with the effort and the housing needs assessment. Entire effort is to create more available housing.
Yeah, I
Right,
don't, think this is a no lose situation, I think.
which is why I was confused that there was the recommendation to not allow or to for the primary resident to still be, on premise. So that's why I was very confused by that, to see that in there, because the whole point of us going through the housing study for the past half a year was just to increase the stock. And it's not going to be a silver bullet of any one, tactic. It's going to be multiple. So I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something with the PC's recommendation against that.
No, I was in the room. There was one person who expressed a concern, but I don't think it was batted around too much. And I don't, I think as it was getting to be late in one of those sessions, I think people saw what was ahead of us and just moved on without resolving it.
And maybe I
Okay.
can add that perhaps for some comfort, this is the ordinance the planning commission recommended approval on
Yeah, that's true.
unanimously.
Do we still have to go to public?
Yes, we do.
discussion?
So do we have any more clarifying questions? If not, we'll go to public comment.
Is there anyone in the room?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
There's not.
There are no folks from the public in the room, so go ahead, please.
Kathleen Chip by Magnolia Star Route. I just want to point out that Tanya just made the clarification, and Miranda, I believe, just validated everything I've been saying. Tanya just said, so if it's not prohibited, it's permitted. And the response was yes. And that's the point of all of the code and the point I've been trying to make this entire while. If it's not prohibited, which is what rules and regulations do, then it is permissible. And I just don't understand where we're losing the connection. You're saying that it is that way for this, but it's not that way for everything else in the code. And I just want to point that out because this meeting is being recorded and we do just have the town administrator saying the complete opposite of what she said when I was talking about the right to have paid parking. I mean, I don't get where the disconnect is. I'm going to continue to point it out every time it comes up, though, because it just was explained to Tanya correctly. She just specifically said, oh, I don't get this. So if it's not prohibited, it's allowed. And the response was yes. And that's my point about everything in the code, okay? If you don't stipulate an animal, it is allowed, okay? So that's my point. I just want to say I'm very glad it was just validated as accurate. And when it's accurate in this case, it's accurate in all the cases. That's my point. And I hope we can swallow that. I know people don't like me, but let me just say, this is the point of being, the United States operates different from every other country in the world. And the laws limit us, and that's all they do. If it's not limited in the law, just like Tanya just verified and just like Miranda just said, and I don't know where the disconnect is on the rest of the code, and I believe that I don't even know why the agreement just went down, because I'm stunned. Okay, that's it. Any questions?
Kathleen, thanks. We're slow, but we're learning.
Okay, that's all I'm saying, okay? If it's not prohibited, it is permitted. It is permissible. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Any other public comments on ADUs?
Thanks for clarifying.
If not, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion and motion.
Tanya, you got this one?
Want to make a motion, Tanya?
Oh, sure, I got it. Let me get to the right page, though. I'm on the wrong page.
Page 113 of the newest edition.
Yes. Parking aim. There it is. Okay. So we're just gonna go as is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait,
I-
did we, real quick, Eric, did we add or subtract anything to this or was this? Oh, yeah,
No.
it's clean. Go for it.
Yeah, and this might be the first one.
Yeah. Take it.
All right,
Oh.
I move to approve ordinance 850, amending section 16-98 of chapter 16 of the Nederland Municipal Code related to accessory dwelling units.
Second?
Macy?
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
trustee Severs,
Yes.
trustee Sterling,
Yes.
trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahone,
Yes.
and trustee Corvalon.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we've extended to 10:30. We've got two more. And one thing we have to do is we do have to allow some time for public comment on non-agenda items. So just keep that in mind. Our next item is the use group tables, housing needs assessment use group table amendments 5.7. Miranda?
Yep. So under our recommendations, we looked at alternative housing, really more of opening up opportunities for housing. And so I think the biggest thing really, I highlighted in the ordinance, the changes. So I just want to go over those really quick. First thing is currently the use group table has all residential zones packed together. So we broke them up so it's cleaner and clearer for a developer. And that was the whole point of this, to make it clean and easy for a developer to come through and realize, oh, I can build a duplex, triplex, floorplex use by right. And that has been in the code, just to clarify that. I only highlighted where there's changes. Today, a duplex, triplex, quadplex can be built use by right in all residential zones. What you really see here is a lot more SRUs. In order for the town to meet your Proposition 123 goal, you may be looking at developing housing on town-owned land. So you need to have public opened up, because right now it was no's. And so we're saying ours, again, this is public property, so we do think a special review is appropriate to discuss and open up the conversation. And then we added in tiny home villages. It is important to note that yard and bulk still stays in place. And so a tiny home village, you'd have to have a very large parcel to do tiny home, but there's people who have talked to us. And so we're not saying use by right, but to us and the Planning Commission, all of these SRUs open up the conversation. And yeah, maybe in a couple of years from now, we start to flip these to use by right, but the SRU allows us to evaluate, are tiny homes realistic? Could we do quadplexes in public lots? Can we do mixed use and high density? There's a lot of different options here to open up the conversation. But if you note, none of this is use by right. We're basically saying open up the conversation under SRU to allow these different uses in various zones. And so I won't go through all of them, but they're highlighted on page 126 of your packet. What it specifically is a deviation from the current use group table. And that's the only change in this code.
So highlights are only changes.
Correct.
Every change is highlighted.
Correct.
I noticed, the one thing I noticed listening to the discussion on this, it's just that, at least for Roger, that tiny house village term just kind of like short circuited some brains. I don't know if there's a dang better word. Personally, I'm fine with it.
So Commissioner Duggan, who is a realtor, confirmed the tiny home village is the term that people
Okay,
use.
great.
We defined it. And so, yes,
Cool.
we have to spend a lot of time bringing people back to definitions, but we say a tiny home village means that you're constructing 3 or more tiny homes, but you have to meet all yard and bulk requirements. And so, again, in order to truly effectively build a tiny home, you must have a very large parcel.
So yeah, on page 124, you define it right in the middle. Okay.
A tiny home village will not fit on a tiny lot.
Correct. You'd have to have a very large parcel. But the reason that we wanted to include it is people ask us all the time about tiny homes, and we'd love to say, sure, you can go under an SRU, and as long as you meet yard and bulk, you are welcome to go under an SRU process to have a conversation with the Board of Trustees and the Planning Commission about a tiny home village, which is why, again, I know, yes, there may be some feelings about SRU, but by allowing more of these SRUs to come online, it opens up the conversation of alternative housing on different lots, and primarily I think the public is the biggest thing here, because before those were all no's, and if your desire is to develop housing, no matter where it is on public lots, you have to build those back in. At the very least, the public is important here, but we also want to ensure that it just makes it easier and cleaner for people to understand the duplex, triplex, fourplex, that is already used by right. And so by breaking it out, we wanted to make it very clear that you can do that in any residential lots as it stands right now, where felt like by rolling it up and saying multifamily under 4 units, that wasn't as clear to developers, where this is clear.
Yep. And clarity is what we need. There was on Planning Commission, there was one senior member who had a conniption fit over tiny home village and eventually came to the conclusion there's no better thing to call it, and there's no prohibiting it if you meet yard and bulk.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. We're not changing yard and bulk here. We're just opening up the use group table.
But just to clarify, yard and bulk is required regardless if it's SRU or not.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. I guess that's, I think one of the confusions was, oh, the yard and bulk is thrown to the wind when you're doing a tiny home village. That's not the case. You, again, must have a very large scale parcel to do yard and bulk, or to do a tiny home village. But if someone owned multiple acres and they could, this opens up the conversation for that consideration.
And I've most unfortunately, YouTube now has tiny home village as part of my algorithm. I'm looking more than I probably should. But you can do some remarkable things if you have appropriate land. And we've seen examples of that. So I think that this is one out of the ones that Planning Commission decided to take on, but the subcommittee brought back to the Planning Commission. This one took a little more discussion, but everybody came around.
I do have a question.
Tom,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, how come high density residential, it wasn't just a yes?
Miranda, do you
Are you
remember?
talking about for mixed use?
You're talking
No,
mixed
for
use,
tiny
right?
home village.
Oh, I think the feeling is, you're, sorry, for which zone?
Isn't a yes for
High
anything?
density residential.
Because we recognize that if you're gonna bring forward and you're gonna plop 3 units, separate units down on a parcel, that the community may want an opportunity to weigh in on that.
Mhm.
Because the footprint is gonna be much larger than your because you're gonna have to spread out these tiny homes. And
But you still have to meet yard and bulk
right.
Still do,
Yeah.
yeah.
setbacks and everything. I mean,
Yeah.
That to me is kind of, I'm a bit challenged by that because like part of it is increasing density. And so I like when you said that earlier, like to build a tiny home village, you can't do it on a tiny lot. Well, that seems unfortunate. I mean, because there might be a spot where it would be nice to just have a denser
We'll
Yeah.
take it.
zoning
Yeah.
for high density, like a higher density, if you will, like that's.
I think the
Billy?
planning commission really felt, and just, so tiny home was the hardest of them all. So one thing for consideration is that this could come off and we go back to the planning commission and keep working at that. This was felt for many important to still keep and allow under the SRU, and then maybe there's a later time in which we revisit the yard and bulk side of tiny home villages.
Yeah.
But until we start seeing the applications, it was like, there was also a feeling of like, why, let the applications roll through and then start.
Well, I wonder though if the fact that you have to have a lot of land to do it, and right now the PIF fees are still high, that you're really going to not see many applications because it's kind of
Correct.
expensive to build tiny homes.
Correct. As the code stands right now, you'd have to have separate connections. You'd pay, say, 3 separate PIF fees to connect tiny homes as the code stands right now. So yeah, this may be like a long shot that someone wants to come do it, but because we get questions about it, it would be great to say, sure, you can. You need to have the yard and bulk, you need to have the lot size, and you need to then go through your SRU process.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this needs to be another discussion that the yard and bulk for tiny homes may be changed.
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to change that tonight.
No, not tonight.
But I think that let's see if this is enough of a market signal to get somebody to come in and say, I want to develop within these parameters.
Because now I'm confused and I don't want to keep beating this down. So the distance between each little tiny home is the exact same as you would need if it were an ADU or a neighbor's house.
I mean, they would all be principal structures, so principal structure setbacks.
You couldn't just like
So
pack in a bunch of little, I
and
understand
even
the
on the
perimeter of the house would
tiny
want.
lot, you'd have to have 25 foot times 2 between the houses.
Right, so
That-
that was,
yeah.
that was hard for them. So the only reason that this stayed on is to Mayor Pro Tem Mahold's point. Right now, if someone says, oh, I'm interested in a tiny home village, we say, sorry, it's not in our code. Where now we can say, sure, it's in our code, and we can like talk to developers and we at least become a community that's interested and open. But yes, it's probably a longer term discussion, but that was kind of the feeling of leaving it in. The phrase the planning commission kept coming back to is it opens up the conversation. And this may end up being unrealistic, and we come back to you all and say, hey, we've got a tiny home developer, but yard and bulk isn't going to work. But at least they know town is open to considering it by allowing it on the use group table as a special review use. It instead of just shutting down the conversation right off the jump, which is really kind of what's happening now, is that we have to shut it down because it's just not a use.
well, I was more debating whether it should be a Y versus an R, not an N. Like, does the SRU, what does the SRU give us that a yes doesn't?
One step.
I think
towards where it should be.
public input, I think the planning commission felt like tiny home villages people might not take too well. And so this gave them an opportunity to provide their public input under an SRU.
Yeah, but if the yard and bulk is the same
Yeah,
Right.
what,
as
what,
a house,
how
then
did it-
nobody would be affected because nobody's
Right.
gonna have, it's like just a normal house, just
Nope.
much smaller.
We're not opposed to it as staff. We just, understand that this, I think you all know by now, this planning commission really, it's the hard jump from no to yes. It's like no R to yes. Like they do prefer the special review use process as the planning commission.
I grew up in a neighborhood that was primarily platted in the 30s, this is in the Chicago area, and they were big lots. And then in the 60s, they came back and changed the law, and there's 60s modern houses tucked in between all of them. And I suspect that's where we may end up as we change our minds and come around to density.
Hey, Miranda, technically though, if somebody were to come to us with 100% affordable housing and they wanted to build a tiny home village, they could, based off the next ordinance, request a 50% variance, correct?
Correct.
And that's why we should approve this and move on. We
Okay.
got very little
Would
time.
love if you got to all of these.
Do we have any more clarifying questions? Very good point. Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, good segue.
Yeah. Do we have any more clarifying questions? If not, let's go to public comment. On
5-7.
5.7. Sorry. Use group table amendments. No one's in the room, so if you're online,
Hearing none.
hearing none, we'll bring it back and we will bring it back for discussion of the motion.
Is there appetite to change the Rs to Ys, or should we just leave them Rs?
Let's leave Mars for tonight.
I think ours, having been the planning commission, it does seem like a step that still builds in I mean, it
build the
builds in
tiny-
a step,
Build
but-
the damn tiny houses, do it.
but I guess the yes with, there's the fact that if they're following the same yard and bulk, that
Yeah.
why wouldn't we just say yes?
Given this though, Miranda, process wise, if we decided next meeting that we really wanted to put a Y in there, would it have to go back through planning commission again?
It is a chapter 16 amendment.
Yep.
So, yes.
I think we should change them to Ys personally, but if no one else does.
I'm open to doing that.
I'm open to that too, because maybe that would be the one barrier that would overcome the fact that they're paying big PIF fees and have huge large yard and bulk is that, well, at least I don't have to go through an SRU.
Right. And we as staff already anticipate rate study. One of our recommendations to you will be not requiring separate taps, that you can have one line in and then pull off that line. Because right now, even your detached ADU has to pay its own PIFs and do a separate tap. So we intend to bring that forward to allow a tiny home to be more realistic from a PIF perspective. Because right now you'd be paying minimum of three separate PIF fees.
A tiny pipe for a tiny home.
Yeah, you might have to have a
One
larger
bathroom,
pipe going.
less water.
Well-
Larger pipe going into your village, but then people could tie off from that pipe.
Well, I move to approve ordinance 855, amending chapter 16 of the Nederland Municipal Code to amend the use group table to allow for other residential structures in the residential zone districts with the following changes: that the use table in section 4, section 16-32, sorry, the use groups, that table be amended so that tiny house villages are is a use group that is permitted outright in mountain residential, low density residential, medium density residential, high density residential, and neighborhood commercial, as well as public zones.
We
Wow.
have a motion and a second.
Oh, that's too much for me. I'm only for the high density or medium density.
So where specifically would you have problems?
Why?
Just because it's high density is really only where I'd like to see a Y, because it's high density already. Versus mountain residential actually has land, acre, right, is the requirement. So then all of a sudden that acre, 25, 50 feet's not a big deal in that acre. And then you've got 10 houses in the acre lot.
You'd still need to meet minimum maximum lot size, so you'd have to have, you'd have to have 3 acres in order to have a tiny home village in mountain residential, as it
Why?
stands right now. Because everybody has to adhere to yard and bulk, so each structure, each dwelling unit has to meet the minimum lot size, which is an acre.
Okay. I thought I heard 25 feet or 50 feet or something.
Now those, I mean, those
That
are
was-
setbacks, but again, you're on your acre. I mean, this would be it would be a huge parcel. It'd be 3 acres with 3
Okay.
tiny structures on them.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, I just don't want to see,
No one would do it.
I don't want to see, you
But
know,
if
even,
Someone
it just
wants
would
to.
bother me, you know, if everyone's got one house on an acre or whatever, and the next thing you know, you've got 10 houses and that, more for the, like the traffic and.
Well, I think where this is different is public, right? Public is 0 minimum lot size, 0 setbacks. And so on a public lot, the town could, if you left that use by right.
Oh, I'm sorry. I amend my motion. I'm sorry. I meant I did not intend to include public zone there.
Figured as
That
much.
was I misspoke.
Okay, well, if
That's
if
all right.
that's the case, then I'm okay with it. Yeah, I just didn't want to change like the entire.
Not Big Springs.
Well, Big Springs is medium density then, right?
No, it's
Big
mountain.
Springs is mountain.
It's all mountain.
No, there's half acre lots in Big Springs, lots of them.
Maybe not, they're not. there's
Medium
lots
is
of
less than half acre.
but under
There's lots of them all on the lake.
There's third
But
acre
anyway,
lots.
but
yeah.
you're saying that then each tiny home would still have to have an acre or a half
Correct.
acre, whatever. the deal
Because
is.
there's no recommendation to amend yard and bulk. here.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
that's fine then. Well, then it's just building a small house. It's just no different.
Exactly. Why not let people
Yeah,
build
why
a
not
small
allow
house?
it? Like,
Yeah. I think it's crazy to disallow it.
yeah,
Hope for the
okay.
best later. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, my motion that I amended to not include the public zone, just to make it very clear.
I'll second that.
Got a motion, a second, Macy? I will say all of Big Springs is mountain residential, no matter what's lot size. Looking at the map. Go ahead.
Right, but there's lots of half acres. Anyway,
All right.
I second it.
Oh, it's.
We have a motion, a second, Macy?
So I had Nicole second, I had Tom second, and Tanya, so I'm gonna go
No,
with
we had
Justice.
this, yeah, we had an amendment, a second, and then we had an amendment to the
To his
amendment.
motion, and
Yeah.
which you seconded.
I seconded that.
Thank you for
yeah.
that clarification.
Okay.
Okay.
Tom was the second,
Okay,
the second that mattered.
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
Jesse, oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry, Trustee Severs,
Yes, you can call me Jesse anytime.
Trustee Sterling,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes, and don't call me Eric.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahol,
Yes.
and Trustee Corvalon.
Yeah. Yes.
So the motion passes, 5.7 passes with the housing needs use group table amendment. So we have 5 more minutes. We could extend. We are obligated for the public comment and non-agenda items, correct? So that we gotta have time, allow for. It may not amount to anything. We have one more item which we could do tonight and be done with it, or not be done with it, but complete it. Or
I'm glad we shelved
continue
it.
it. So I'd be willing to extend. the
I move to
meeting.
extend the meeting until 10:45.
I'll second.
How about 10:40?
10:40.
10 for,
That gives us 15 minutes.
okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm sorry, who seconded that one?
Me.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mayor Billy,
Yes. Yes.
Trustee Severs,
Yes.
Trustee Sterling,
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahol,
Yes.
and Trustee Corvalon.
Yes.
Thank you. We move on to number 5.8, housing needs assessment, affordable housing, yard and bulk variance. Miranda?
So this is a variance to the yard and bulk table for any 100% deed restricted housing. So what this says is if a developer comes forward to build a 100% deed restricted housing, they can request an up to 50% variance on all yard and bulk except for maximum lot size and height. There's no variance for height, and they can only do a 15% maximum lot size variance. What we have here is that they would meet with town staff, we would negotiate, we would discuss what is the minimum relief needed for their build. And then it would go before the planning commission, and I apologize, originally it said BZA, but we're going before the planning commission, who will then vote to approve the final negotiation. So this doesn't just happen at an administrative level. The planning commission gets the ultimate say. The reason we want to do this is we do want to provide an opportunity, if you're going to do 100% deed restriction, that you should be able to do a larger footprint on the parcel. We also ask that if this were to happen, the planning commission hears it without delay, and that there's no application fee, that they move straight to the planning commission within 30 days. And so the reason for this is obviously under Prop 123, those are 100% de-restricted homes. So if you're looking to do a public-private partnership, this is one way to try and incentivize, is allowing them to kind of negotiate some of those yard in bulk. And so if you're interested in this motion, again, it's 856, so you'll be amending Chapter 16 related to affordable housing and providing a unique variance process to promote the development of affordable housing.
Any clarifying questions?
I mean, I guess I have one, which is in the criteria. So criteria I, that the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or district in which the property is located. I mean, if this is in mountain residential, I guess it'd be pretty hard to. It's a very vague criteria, I guess is what I'm saying. This idea of it altering the essential character, and I think that a lot of folks in neighborhoods would argue that a development that would fall under this would, without doubt, alter the essential character of the neighborhood, almost no matter what.
Yeah, that's actually, the evaluating criteria for the BZA for any variance. And so we rolled it over. And we
Understood.
recognize it's vague. I think that in many of your, perhaps looking at codifying some of your design standards, like those things should be clarified in many ways. But yeah, the BZA operates off that vague of a evaluating criteria.
Okay, well, in that case, I don't want to hold this up anymore, but I do think that it's something for the future that we should be looking at is really adjusting some of these very vague criteria that can easily be argued to come into play in pretty much every single case. Anyway, yeah, that was my only question.
And I think that's a larger conversation because that we see that same language repeated multiple times throughout the code.
Yeah. Yeah, just repeating it again, repeating like bad language again always makes me like die inside a little bit. Well, and I don't like it.
Yeah, but I think that's a part of that.
I know Jennifer doesn't hate it.
Plan design criteria
Yeah.
and really clarifying some of that. What does that mean? And so I understand what you're saying. I think our feeling is that will get clarified under the comp plan and some of that land use and design criteria.
I mean, raising densities, building affordable housing, these are things that across the country are opposed by the neighborhoods that they are built in, right? Like very, very regularly and frequently. And yeah, it's easy to argue that this, no matter what, will change the essential character of the neighborhood. So just throwing that out there. I don't like the criteria.
Any other clarifying questions before we go to public comment? I have one. You say maximum lot size. Do you mean maximum lot coverage? Or am I just,
Where are you reading that?
well, say the very top of page 130. When you talk about that, if it's 100% de-restricted, we can request up to 50%, or someone can request up to 50% variance for yard and bulk, except for maximum lot size and building height. Is it maximum lot coverage?
Maximum lots. Yeah. Yeah, no, maximum lot size. Well, I guess Billy's saying though, it says maximum lot coverage percentage.
What does that mean?
It means how much impermeable structures can be built on the percentage that can be built on a lot.
It's maximum.
Well,
The way Commissioner Duggan wanted was maximum lot coverage. So
that's what I wanted.
You can go from only being able to build on 40% of your lot to now 60% of your lot. It's Because you want to have that defensible space and you want to have that surrounding. So sorry, that should be maximum lot coverage.
That's what I thought, up to 50% maximum lot coverage variance would be allowed.
So that way you end up not being able to kind of maximize more than half of your footprint, because we do want to make sure from a fire standpoint and safety, we'd allow defensible spaces.
Yeah, I just, when I heard maximum lot size, I started looking through the code. I'm like, what are they talking about?
We didn't, yes, it should have been maximum lot coverage.
Yeah, I think that's what Timmy said.
Yes.
That makes sense, because that was a biggie with the solar and a bunch of other stuff.
Good catch.
We're on the edge of accomplishing what we set out to.
Public
We
comment.
are. Should we do some public comment? Public comment on this particular 8.8 or 5.8 action item, affordable housing yard bulk variance. There's no one in the room. Does anyone have a public comment online? Hearing none, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion and a motion. I guess I'm just trying to look and see, like, with regards to the ordinance, that we just, I mean, is there any discussion? Because I have an idea for a motion. That one, with that one edit.
Then why don't you do that?
So I would read my script, which is I move to approve ordinance 856, amending chapter 16 of the Nederland Municipal Code related to affordable housing and providing a unique variance per process to promote the development of affordable housing with the change of maximum lot size to maximum lot coverage.
Second.
Macy?
Trustee Corvalon,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahol,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
Trustee Severs,
Yes.
and Trustee Sterling.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good work. The motion passes. So we got through those 8 action items tonight. Right now, we'll open up for public comment on non-agenda items. If you have something you want to say, you have 3 minutes. Public comment on non-agenda items. And while we're waiting, I will just say I appreciate the folks who did turn in public comments in advance. Judy Anderson, Susan Wagner, Hunter Wright, and Kathleen Chipai. There was responses from town staff. They're in the packet to Judy Anderson's questions and Susan's, and Hunter was giving us some good info from Eldora. And Kathleen, your public comment could actually go back into an agenda in a couple weeks, in 4 weeks when we talk about that one. Anyone else have any comments?
I'm glad we did what we did tonight. I'm glad we recognized up front what was not doable tonight. And I never like kicking stuff down the road. I think we did a great job.
Thanks. Yeah, good job, everyone. I do have one piece of other business, just around, just, I meant to say it earlier. So if we do this, back to January 9th, if we were to do the orientation for the applicants, and when you have something with the youth, and I understand there might be someone who wants to have a work session discussion with us on January 9th. How does that all fit
I forgot
together?
about the orientation until I was presenting this. I already sent an email to that team and said no longer available. And I've said,
January
well,
19th.
here are the vacant January nights if you're interested in meeting.
Okay. Oh, okay, cool. 'Cause I just was worried about all those things happening together.
It's been dealt with.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Box. And just maybe really quick, just a reminder, volunteer appreciation party is this Thursday from 5 to 7.
Thank you.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Macy?
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
Trustee Corvalon,
Yes.
Trustee Sterling,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahol,
Yes.
Trustee Severs,
Yes.
and Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Yes.
Thank you. The meeting.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tanya. Thanks,
Good job,
Nicole.
folks.